All right, thank you, everyone. It's 1:30. Quorum is in the room, so I'm going to restart the committee. So we're still on item number 5, which is the plastic bags and green bin report. Questions to staff or to the mover? None. Because it isn't a staff report, it's a council's report, so questions are permitted to the mover as well. Councillor Hubley is the first up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question to staff was, we heard a lot today about the biodegradable versus the regular bags. I'm wondering, did you do any of that research before settling the contract with the amended changes?
In discussions with Renew, we knew that the biodegradable bags would not break down within the time frame of the plant's process. And
there was no hope to make changes to the process or whatever, extend it out a few days or whatever to match. There was nothing. We couldn't do anything like that. So that's how you settled on just any plastic bag.
In order for those bags to degrade, they would have to stay in the system for at least 50 days or more.
Right.
And that would obviously add a huge cost to the operations of that plant. So it wouldn't be economically viable.
Okay. Because they're buying machines that are going to cut the bags open and then remove the bags. Is that correct?
It would also be the capacity of the plant. If you're tripling or quadrupling the retention time in the plant, you would need obviously a much bigger facility.
No, okay, sorry, understood. But one of the things they're doing is they're buying a machine, I understood, that will cut the bags, allow the waste to come out, and then the bags are going to get removed to be sent to landfill. So part of the discussion this morning was around small pieces of the bag staying in the compost material. But under their plan, that shouldn't happen too much. Is that, am I talking the right facts here or not? No,
you are correct. The way the material is going to come into the plant, it will be roughly shredded. So it's not shredded into little pieces, it's shredded into large ribbons. And then it goes through the compost process, and then there's screening equipment that will screen out the plastics at the end of the process. Part of the negotiations with World is they're actually enhancing their screening process, so they're updating the types of screens and the amount of screening that will occur at the end of the process to minimize the amount of plastics that would end up in the compost.
So for anyone such as myself, as I learn more about these biodegradable bags, I'm disappointed that the timeline doesn't match up with the process, but I think I'd still rather use that because when that goes to the landfill, it's going to break down at the landfill, correct?
There's very little evidence that biodegradable bags break down in the landfill because the landfill is in an anaerobic situation, so there's a lack of air, and there's also a lack of moisture because we purposefully cover that material as quickly as possible to reduce the amount of leachate that's generated. So it's not an ideal place for biodegradable plastics to decompose.
So in the processes we're using today, and hopefully we can improve on this in the future, but for today, because that contract you were negotiating, or renegotiating I should say, we wanted that implemented as fast as possible because we want to improve the percentage of people using the green bin, correct? That was the direction you had from council was, because it took several years to renegotiate, correct? From the end of arbitration to when a settlement was reached. Okay, so I guess in closing, Mr. Chair, on this one, the expectation then, is it safe for us as council to have the expectation that when we go through the waste review that will start up next year, we can start looking at options such as incineration and other things like that that could perhaps deal with this plastic issue?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Cloutier.
Thank you, Chair. Merci, and thank you for the presentations by all the speakers today, and Marilyn and Kevin. So just a couple of questions, and I take it you want us to wrap up also. Is that correct, Chair? Very well. what do we expect as a result of the decision that was made in March 2018? What do we expect the increase in, if any, in composting behavior? Do we have any data, any expectations?
We are, based on evidence in other municipalities who moved from paper programs to plastic programs, they all saw significant increases in the tonnage of organics. Based on our modeling, we are expecting over 10,000 tons of organics to increase almost immediately. That's also, so that's household organics, but it's also the inclusion of pet waste.
Okay, thank you. And again, as we discussed earlier, as we spoke of earlier, we are not encouraging plastic bags. It's not a requirement. Can you give us a little bit of an aperçu of the advertising that you might be considering with respect to this program?
So staff will be coming to committee in June with a fulsome report on the program to promote the new enhanced service levels. So at this point, I don't have details of what we're going to be promoting.
But we will be bringing, the approach we'll be using is a hierarchical approach. So if you're participating now using your newspaper, please still do so. If buying biodegradable bags will motivate you to participate, please do that. But it's all about convenience. So we're trying to lower all the barriers to participate into this program. So we all know most people have single-use plastic bags sitting around their household. There's no barrier to using those. They can use them quickly and they're readily available, and they would probably end up in the landfill in any case.
If I can add to that, I mean, we're not encouraging using single-use plastic bags. We're actually encouraging people to use plastic bags that they inadvertently have in their homes already. So we're encouraging people to use their bread bags, their cereal bags, their milk bags. Certainly we're not going to be encouraging people to go out and purchase specific bags to line their bins.
Okay, thank you. So just to wrap up, we heard a lot today with respect to wishing that the diversion rates were higher, and we know, and some of the speakers spoke of human behavior and how difficult it is to get people to change their behavior. The fact is that 50% of the waste stream that is going into garbage is organics that we could compost and reuse. The fact is, the reality is that dog waste that is currently going into garbage can be composted. The fact is that right now, today, as we speak, there is organics in plastic bags in the garbage that is about to be picked up, and it won't be reused. Those are the realities, and in that we've been told, and the report, that a lot of the should people use plastics, they will be screened out as much as possible, and always within the Ministry of the Environment guidelines.
You're correct.
And we are not encouraging this. And the question continues to be how to change behavior, how to increase the participation. And then there's the fact, and it hasn't been touched on a lot, with respect to the economics. There's a contract in place that we've entered into based on Council's direction last March 2018 with respect to the putter pay changes and the change in the tonnage. And if we are not increasing our tonnage of organic waste, that money would be wasted, and it is $1 million. Some of the speakers today spoke of the single use and discouraging the use of single-use plastics, and that would be wonderful. That would be extraordinary. But that's not the motion we have today, and if ever a motion like that would come forward, it would be a good debate to have, and I would welcome it. With respect to the motion by Councillor Menard, point number 6, And as I've said, it's regulated by the Ministry of the Environment, and Renewy would be obligated to be respectful of those thresholds. And with respect to his point number 7 of increasing participation in the green bin and introducing green bins to more apartment buildings, again, some of those programs are in place and they need to be improved. And we do need to get IC&I institutions included in our recycling and our programs. And so, with the objective of increasing participation in the green bin, and with the objective of keeping plastics, of not encouraging plastics, of encouraging participation in the green bin, and not shortening the life of our trail road site, as Councillor Brockington spoke of a little bit earlier before lunch. I think the plan that was established by Council in March 2018, that it got overwhelming support at Council, is the correct plan, and on that basis, I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Councillor Cloutier. Councillor Eglai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we were shown a slide, a photo of a sample, if you will, or of compost and what came out of it. Over the lunch break, I had a brief chat with the delegation that presented it, and was able to ascertain that the sample was taken a week or so ago, directly from the Renewy plant. So my first question to you, Marilyn, is: has the retooling been done at the plant to enhance the ability to screen, or is a new process in place, and that's what we're seeing?
The plant, as we speak, is being upgraded right now. So there's major construction works happening at the plant. The new screening equipment is not in place as of yet. So that will all be put into place in the next 2 to 3 months. So at this point, there is no new technology in that plant.
Okay. So the technology they're putting in the plant, and that was part of our discussions with them, do we know of it being used in other plants for similar purposes?
Plastic bags in the organics program is used across Ontario. We're one of the last municipalities to embrace plastic bags. So this is not new to the province. Pretty well every municipality has already moved to plastic bags, and they are using similar technologies to screen out the residuals that, the inorganic components at the end of the process. So this is proven, this is it's acceptable by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and the products are all being used on lands as it is meant to be.
Okay, we've heard a lot from delegations that due diligence or research wasn't carried out, and we should have that information before we make this decision. And as Councillor Cloutier pointed out, Council did make this decision in the previous term of Council. Can you maybe, for the gallery and also for maybe some of the newer members of Council, refresh us as to what research you carried out, what sort of studies you did before coming forward with the recommendation that you did last term of Council?
Well, first, it was a negotiated outcome of a legal proceeding, so that it was the framework around this negotiated enhanced service level. But we also did a business case. We looked at the finances around what we were proposing. We researched municipalities across Ontario. So we do have a very good scan of what is happening in the province.
And you say we're one of the last to sort of get on the bus with this acceptance of plastics. It's been around for a while, and the ministry approves it. Have there been any circumstances that you're aware of where the ministry has stepped in to a processing plant and said, this isn't working, you're getting levels higher than you should be getting, higher than what we consider to be safe?
I'm not aware of any plants that have had any issues.
Okay. Councillor Cloutier had asked a question as well around we were ending up getting organics and plastic bags currently in our landfill. And this is obviously meant to help address that. Can you give us a sense of what sort of tonnage on a yearly basis is sitting in the plastic bags now of organic material?
So currently, about 60% of the organic material is still going to landfill. So 60% of the household organics are going to landfill.
And that's, you said earlier, that's what, about 100,000 tons a year?
No, the overall organic stream is, yeah. So my numbers are a little, yeah. I don't have the exact numbers at this point.
I guess where I'm trying to go with this is if we continue as we're doing and we don't make a change and that organics keeps on sitting in those plastic bags, what does that do to the life of the landfill?
Currently, based on current diversion rates, which is 50% diversion residential, the landfill will be closed in 2043. So every extra ton you divert away from that landfill adds to the life of the landfill.
And the other cities that have been doing this prior to us, obviously longer than us, what sort of a leap have they seen in their diversion rates?
So this is where our basis of our business case was based on what was the experience in other municipalities, and most of them saw a 20% increase in tonnage of organics right off the hop.
Can you give us a sense of what some of those other cities in Ontario are that are using this system or this approach?
Yeah, actually I have a list. But the majority of them, so basically all of the GTA, Toronto, Newmarket, Vaughan, King City, Markham, Richmond Hill, Aurora, Stouffville, Waterloo, Belleville, Kingston, Montreal, Victoria, Calgary, the province of PEI.
Okay. And I'm not absolutely convinced that doing this is going to get the real green bin deniers on board. And I'm not convinced that even more education is going to do that either. So are we still going to have that robust discussion about bag and tag and limiting bags and see-through bags and everything else that goes along with that? Because there's the carrot and the stick. We've used the carrot a lot. We're where we are. Are we going to be looking at the stick remedies, so to speak, as we go forward?
And that will be the purpose of the 30-year master plan. It's to look at those strategies that will help us achieve our goals and targets that are established in the plan. So that will involve public consultation, and we will be bringing forward the whole range of opportunities for a fulsome discussion through the master planning process.
And you were talking about how your aim is to get people to reuse milk bags, bread bags, but there are discussions at the provincial level to ban single-use plastic. Are we part of those discussions? Are we consulted in any way, and have we had input to date on where we think that should be going?
Yeah, so we're following very closely all of the discussions at the provincial and federal level. I sit on the Municipal 3Rs Collaborative, which is a collaborative of major municipalities across Ontario. So we have a fairly strong voice with regards to waste management policy in the province. But also, to be clear, in the policy plan that the previous provincial government put out, they actually acknowledged and accepted that municipalities were using plastic bags in the green bin program, and were endorsing the continued use of that. So there is not a policy change with regards to plastic bags in the green bin at this time.
No, I understand that, but this provincial government has indicated, correct me if I'm wrong, that they're looking at a ban of single-use plastics.
Yes, at the purchase place, but not necessarily in the green bin program.
No, correct, I get that, but if there's less flowing into the home, then presumably there's less going out of the home. And so just to be clear, not just in terms of the green bin, but in terms of whether single-use plastics should be banned or discontinued, we are part of that discussion? That's the round table that you're sitting at?
Yeah, it's the broader base discussion, but yes, we are following that very closely. And
as part of that roundtable discussion and as a representative of the city, is your position at that table is that you would support? Like, what are you saying on behalf of the city as our input into that process, or can you say at this point?
Right now, they're just high-level strategies, so there's nothing specific to, there aren't any regulations. They're just, at a high level, how would this roll out? It's not, there are no specifics to really say, like, until you know exactly how they're planning to roll it out, we can't comment on it.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is our position as city rep that we are supportive of a single-use plastic ban? Is that the type of question that you're asked input on?
Yeah, it's not at that level yet, if you know what I mean. They're just putting out a broad-based concept and seeking input.
And has this government indicated that they will be putting a change in terms of how they're going to involve the cities? In other words, the round table approach was under the previous government. Has this government indicated that they're going to go it alone, or are they still looking for us as cities to bring our input to the table?
Yeah, so there's various consultations and maybe that are going on. So some are federal consultations and some are provincial. So the one that really has the most impact to the city is the provincial consultation that's going on the circular economy. And that is really about how do we increase waste diversion from landfills. And so definitely there we are looking at what, they have listed a bunch of questions, and we will be reporting back to the province on those questions.
Okay, and last question. You put a pilot project in place last year in the parks for receptacles for your dog pooping in the park, which probably accounts for a fair bit of the organics that are sitting in plastic bags in landfill. Are we going to enhance that project? Are we going to make it more accessible so more people can utilize it and then move the organics that way?
So you're correct. Last year we piloted recycling in 50 parks. This year we are going to do organics collection in 10 parks. So we're looking at a variety of parks, so linear parks, multi-use parks, and this will be a one-year pilot to see what the quantities of organics are in parks. Can we actually empty bins in the winter time? So it will be a full one-year pilot. And based on the findings of the 2 pilots, we'll be coming back to council with our findings and potentially with recommendations.
So are the pilots going to run concurrently, or are we finished one and we're entering into a different one?
We have finished the first pilot, the recycling one, and now we're going to enter into the second pilot.
And when will we be coming back to committee to talk about how the pilots worked or didn't work?
So it's a one-year pilot, and by the time we tabulate all of that information, it probably wouldn't be until Q3 of next year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bockington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How long will it take you to answer Councillor Menard's questions for the data he's seeking in his motion?
So Councillor Menard's question is around the contamination of compost. And as I alluded to earlier, this is not a new issue. Municipalities across Ontario have been using plastic bags in their green bin program for many years. The product coming out of the composting facilities across Ontario is regulated by the Ministry of the Environment and Conservation and Parks. And so the onus is on the operators of these facilities to ensure their products meet those environmental standards. So the data is already there in that this is an acceptable practice across the province of Ontario.
I don't want to speak to for my colleague. He will have his opportunity. I'm just looking at his motion. He's focusing on research into the effect of introducing single-use plastic bags into the bin. And we've heard multiple speakers today about concerns that the residual plastic will have, not just on compost, but the long-term health effects when it's entered into the soil and the water stream, and potentially even ingested by animals, if not humans. So I think it's a fairly detailed ask because it has to look at many different angles, many different sectors. So realistically, if this motion passed today, or if a revised motion passed today asking you to do that research in particular, how long do you think that would take?
Chair, I've spoken with the general manager of Renew Canada. They have a fairly rigorous testing regime that they're willing to share with us. Their material is tested in lab conditions. The results there, and they do it on a regular basis. And as Marilyn's pointed out a couple times, it's provincially mandated. They're certainly willing to share that information with us, so I can share it with the councillor.
Okay, again, I'll let Sean speak up. I think what he's getting at is what are the risks to human health, if not others, if we do this? And hopefully he'll expand on that. I think folks are somewhat frustrated in our decision a year ago, which I supported. I was part of the 21 that voted for this because they feel we did not explore enough options fully before making this decision, that there are other options that still remain on the table, either that exist that we can enhance further or that we have not explored yet, which we can, which can help divert more organic waste from the landfill. So I hear that and I acknowledge that. Even in our own community centers, churches I go to, the whole pushback from festivals who don't even recycle or use organic waste. You know, schools, as a former trustee, call it littlest lunches where kids are encouraged to take waste home. They cloak it in an environmental, there is some merit into raising awareness about what comes home, so parents are aware of what gets eaten or not. But if 56% of households don't use their green bin, then what's coming home goes into the garbage. And I think schools can do a lot better job using their green bin than households that don't. So I think there's a greater opportunity with schools as well. Just for clarification, we've asked these questions multiple times, but let's just go through it again. So does a municipality in Ontario now, other than Toronto, have the right or the authority to ban single-use plastics? Do we have that authority right now?
I'll ask Mr. White to answer that question.
I think the broad powers that a municipality has under the Municipal Act could extend very well to a ban on single-use plastics. Of course, you'd have to consider the overall regulatory environment as to whether there were steps taken by the provincial or the federal government in that regard.
And do we have the authority right now to make it mandatory for multi-unit dwellings to offer organic collection in their buildings, apartment buildings?
We would have to pass a bylaw, I assume, to make that happen.
So we do have that authority.
Yes.
Good, let's do it. Institutional, commercial, industrial organizations. Again, my understanding is that's provincially regulated as far as a requirement to recycle. If I go to, not that I go to fast food restaurants, but when I do, I see no recycling facilities on site for paper waste, plastic containers. Again, why is there not already a law in 2019 to force retail and commercial entities within our city to recycle and collect organic waste?
Chair, that's provincial responsibility, as the councillors pointed out. the producer pay regulations that were planned by the previous government and hopefully planned by the current government will take care of that. So all producers of packaging waste, regardless whether they're in the commercial sector or the municipal sector, will be required to have a recycling plan and infrastructure in place.
With respect to the current tonnage that's collected and the projected increase in tonnage, can you just remind the council, or sorry, this committee, if we far exceed our projections and we collect, let's say, 50% more, how does the city get charged for that additional tonnage from our contractor? What are the terms within the contract for a volume that is higher than what we were projecting or estimating?
So the renegotiated contract, we actually lowered the putter pay from 80,000 down to 75,000 tons per year. Right now, we co-collect leaf and yard waste with household organics. As that tonnage, as the household tonnage starts to go up, I will continue to divert more and more leaf and yard waste away to the Trail Road landfill site for composting there. So I will always work to that 75,000 ton putter pay limit at the Renewee plant.
So the 82,000 tons now is a sum of household organics plus yard waste?
You're correct.
Can you just break that down for me, of the 82, which is?
It's approximately 50% household organics and 50% leaf and yard waste, if that's what you're asking.
Yep. So, the situation is worse than I thought it was when I walked into this room, because we're about 41,000 tons of organic waste, not including leaf and yard waste. How long, can you remind me again, the terms of the revised contract? Is this concurrent with the new waste contract that we just approved a few hours ago? Like, does this expire in 3 years? Is this a 3-year contract?
No, this contract expires in 2030.
Okay. So obviously at that point, the city can elect to have a contract that does not include the processing of plastic bags. We can take a decision well before then to promote within our city like the non-usage of plastic bags, but I just wanted to make sure that there's an opportunity to address this. I mean, the challenge, Mr. Chair, is the contract has been renegotiated. We have committed to paying for an additional service, and even if we don't go down this road, the win for us will be to get that tonnage as high as possible. That, again, is the ultimate goal for us. When staff say we're not promoting plastics, I hear what you're saying, but again, what's being interpreted in the community is that because we are permitting it, we are. And I understand the general manager's comment about the education campaign, and there'll be a hierarchy of what we're promoting people to do. But again, the fact remains that plastics will be going in there, and again, I want to inform everyone, I voted in favor of this, and I voted in favor because I remain very concerned about what's not going to our organic collection, that we're sending so much to the landfill. And the recommendations before us a year ago were, we have this research from our communities, here are the options we have tried over the years. Mind you, I think there's an agreement that we haven't exhausted all possible options and opportunities. And I'm very concerned about the lifetime, or the years that are left with our landfill, because it's not a discussion that I want to put residents or taxpayers through. We shouldn't be planning to build another landfill ever. We should get to the point through extensive diversion, recycling, and organic, that we just are not considering that. And whether it's incineration, something you want to look at, or other options with technology, that we get there sooner rather than later. So I've bugged you both repeatedly about some sort of aggressive education campaign, which I think you need to present to us in June. You said you're coming back in June. Not just about how to use the bin, the merits of using the bin. I think we have to tell people what the cost of a new landfill is. I think we have to make people aware of what services exist to clean the bin. I said during the election, I think the city should offer at cost those little paper bags in our libraries and community centers. Not give them out for free, but at least at cost. So if people want to use the little beige bin in their kitchen, which they then dump into their larger green bin, all options should be explored heavily to ensure that if we adhere to the option of using plastic, that is absolutely the last resort, and that we actually don't promote it. We'll accept it because that's a decision council will have made, but we are out there in the community talking about every other option and pushing that as hard as we can. So that is my expectation when you come back in June, and I will not approve or accept anything less. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I know you mentioned the Orca World contract. In my opinion, my belief is that the city's future after 2030 is not with Orca World, and I don't believe it should be. I think we need to be focused the next 10 years on finding a new end use for organics, and I think that fits into our energy evolution as to where we look at that, because there's a dual ability there from energy production and organic waste collection. Certainly we see it on our farms with the biomass digesters. Councillor Menard.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks so much for having the discussion and for staff presenting to us and the delegations that spoke with us as well. I just want to be clear with councillors around the table what this motion does. Right? We're not saying plastic bags are never going to go in the green bin, though I don't think they should. What we are saying is that we don't have enough information right now to be able to do our due diligence around multiple topics when other options exist for helping to separate organic matter from the landfill. So let me just elucidate what those things are, the significant questions that remain that are unanswered, and the significant studies we're currently undertaking that are not done yet, which will directly relate to this decision and haven't been rendered. So some of the questions that have not been answered, and I'm not expecting to be answered. How much will this increase the utilization of single-use plastic bags in Ottawa? How many more plastic bags are going to be used as a result of it? If we're saying this is going to increase our diversion rate to 70%, 70%, I cannot believe that, but if that's what we're saying, how many plastic bags, and that's by plastic bags alone is what I'm understanding, how many plastic bags is that to get that amount of tonnage to 70%? How will our diversion rate increase to 70% from this measure alone? Other municipalities, they've done this, but they've also done multi-residential organics recycling. They've done clear plastic bags. They've done tagging systems. We're not doing any of those things. How will this affect local farmers and food grown in the Ottawa area? We heard from the organics farmer today. Very good presentation about the potential to actually, municipality could potentially make money from this if it's a positive organic stream. Certainly not going to happen right now. But how is it going to affect our farmers in this area? We don't have the answer to that question from what is produced out of the organics recycling program at Renewy. Why have we not seriously considered the alternative no or low-cost strategies to increase organics? We've said it, using clear plastic bags, right? So if they see there's organics in there, they don't pick it up. That's a very simple system. It doesn't cost anybody anything. Mandatory collection from multi-family residential. So yeah, Toronto does the plastic bag in the green bin, but they also have mandatory collection from with fines associated with multi-residential buildings. And it's a drastic improvement. Right now, a third of our multi-residential has it. So we know we can do it. We do it now. A third of them do it, or a fourth of them, I guess, 400 out of the 1,600 multi-residential buildings. We also haven't tried more increased outreach and promotion compared to what other cities do. We've tried it on our own with some of it, but not compared to what other cities do. And that's a fairly low-cost element if we do get more recycling of our organic stream. So in my view, it's premature. And I just want to say the goal of convenience, I agree. You want convenience, but there are convenient ways, such as every multi-residential building that I knocked on a lot of doors in the election. Every single one of them, there's people in there that want this service and they don't have it. And I also understand that the cost for them, for building owners, is going down now because we're actually going to go in and take it out of there. It's not going to be up to the building owner or property manager to take it out. We're going to do that. So we've reduced the cost for those building owners. I want to just talk about what we're moving ahead with before we actually have the studies. So we all want increased organics recycling. We all have that goal. And what we're looking to do to look at other proven methods is we're going to say, look, the staff have been instructed to look into single-use plastics and styrofoam. That's a separate study. That was past council that did that. They added styrofoam not too long ago. We don't have the results of that yet, whether or not we're going to ban or phase out single-use plastics, plastic bags. The city is doing, as you've heard, a 30-year solid waste management plan. That will be done. We're going to decide on it next meeting, and then it'll be done within a year and a half, 2 years. That's what we're talking about. So there's a slight delay, doesn't change much, but it certainly will elucidate for us what options we have. The province certainly considering a ban on single-use plastics and other notions, and the federal government has launched an online public consultation to gather Canadian views. So at the same time as we're doing this, again, we have a lot of municipalities moving in the opposite direction, banning these things. Whole province is doing it. Newfoundland and Labrador has just announced as well. We also allocated some budget money to this, right, to make up for the contract. So I just want to be clear, it has nothing to do with the contract. The contract we initially signed was one of the worst contracts in municipal comment, the history of the municipality after being amalgamated. That's one of the worst contracts, the Greenman contract. It's being renegotiated. Fantastic. That doesn't change anything. Whether or not we make this decision here today and when we put those in doesn't change anything about that contract. We're paying what we're paying, and we're going to pay less as a result of the negotiated contract. Well done to the legal department and staff who did that. But this doesn't change any of that. So all we're looking for is, until we have the studies that we've set out to do, until we have information from the province and the federal government of which way they're going on this, which we've said for other items here today, until we've looked at the other options for no or low cost organics recycling to divert more waste, we should not be moving forward with this initiative. It doesn't mean we won't. It just means we need more information. There was good questions from folks around this table that I think need more discussion. And this is all we're, at the end of the day, trying to achieve, rather than using a petroleum-based product to achieve it, which I don't think we're going to achieve, the diversion rates that we're saying we're going to do with it. There's much better ways to do that. So I urge you to vote in favor of this motion. It doesn't mean it won't come back to you. It will come back to you. That's the state of the motion, and we'll get more information that way as a council. Let's exercise that authority. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Menard. Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. So I did vote against this when it came to us in the last term. There was what I couldn't imagine any good reason to put plastics in our green bin, and I still don't. I think that outside of dog waste, we won't get an increase in the tonnage. So I just want to ask, though, when you say that, other municipalities are already putting plastics in green bin, I don't think that we should just follow them because they're doing it. And as was pointed out, they're coupling that with other measures. Do you have specifics for us, like what was their diversion rate of organics prior? What was it a year later, 2 years later, and what did they do in the meantime? Like, I just don't believe that I don't believe that we made the decision last time based on a full set of, facts, and I don't think we are today. I think that just because, all of the GTA is doing something, all of the GTA often does something that I don't think the City of Ottawa should do, and I won't go any further on that, but I think that we need those facts. So I don't know if you have that today, if that's something that we can have before we say yes or no to this. But I think that I can almost be as certain that the diversion rates alone did not go up by any significant amount after putting plastic in the green bin.
So we do have some information. We hired a consultant to look at what was happening across the province and what the impacts of different initiatives, including plastics, were, and I can share that study with you if you'd like.
If you could share all of that before council, that would be helpful. So I think the difficulty today, obviously, is that we've signed a contract. We're going to pay $1 million a year no matter what we do. And even if we pause today, we're still on for that money. But in the end, I think that we're here to make decisions on what's best for residents, and that includes risks to human health. That includes our climate. That includes our environment. And once again, even though I'm pushed a little further up against the wall, I cannot support putting plastic in green bins. I think the whole notion of the ick factor is something that we say often enough. People believe it. Sure, you might get a few maggots in the middle of the summer, but I think that reality is that when you're throwing out any kind of waste, we used to throw this waste out in our garbage cans. This very waste used to go into our kitchen waste. It used to in our cupboard, and it used to go out into sometimes an aluminum can, sometimes a black plastic can, sometimes wrapped in plastic, sometimes not. But it sat in our kitchen. I never heard the word ick until we decided that we needed to give people a better reason to use their green bin. I think that really what we have to look at is the other measures that we can take that will not just encourage, but force people to do the right thing. We don't want to open up a new landfill. We don't want to continue to affect the environment the way that we are. Then we have to take strong measures. So I'm going to support the motion as it is in front of us, and I do look forward to receiving that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor DeRusse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, both councillors actually highlighted that this is a bad contract that we got in it a while back, and we're trying to deal with the renewal of the contract, or let's say the renegotiation of the contract. I know there is some legal fact. My question will be probably for legal. Didn't we already sign? We actually dealt with this file in 2018, and we signed into the new agreement. If we stop right now the plastic bag, do we have a legal obligation, or what is the term for that contract if we do so right now?
Mr. Chair, in the context of the contract obligates City Council to pay an increased rate per ton. It does not obligate the city to adopt a particular program. As others have pointed out, the city will be paying that rate regardless of whether it changes the program or not. So it's not a breach of contract issue as much as it is a change of program policy question.
Perfect. So that will bring us back to the taxpayer that we are on the hook right now. If we don't look at from a different way of doing our garbage, and if we're not thinking outside the box to be able to not cost the taxpayer more money that we should pay, this is the solution, and that's, I think, the recommendation that you came to us. And on top of that, I'm thinking Olga Ward or the new Renew, they upgraded their facilities to take some of that. Can you talk a little bit about that also, that deal that we've done with them, and how much it's costing us?
Part of the Chair, part of the negotiation with Renew included them putting in so 3.4 for the upgrades, which the increase in tipping fee is paying for, and $9 million of their own money in terms of plant upgrades, and I think there's some improvements they made to their own plant.
And also, if my memory serves correctly, in the last term, we were talking about implementing these in Q1 2019. Am I correct? Is that right or no?
Yeah, construction's underway.
And now we're not going to looking to implement this till Q2?
The target date we're looking to implement is July 1st.
Are we financially, we still okay? Because I know that we are on the hook to pay for the extra. How this is going to implicate into your budget?
As Mr. White pointed out, we'll have to pay regardless. We'll just be paying for a service we're not receiving.
Okay. And this is just, I know, like, we thank the delegation, and I respect all my colleagues around the table that we do have to address these issues, but sometimes when you have a contract, you're really trying to deal with it and to minimize the cost for the taxpayer. You got to look from perspective of how we can do the business and moving on with the contract, that we stuck with it till 2030 without costing the taxpayer more money on canceling or renewing different contract. Is it a good solution? I don't think I like it very much, but you know what? For me, it's going to increase, we hear it time and time again, the yak factor. What's the yak factor? We all know it's a maggot. And people say we need weekly garbage collection. Well, that's not ideal in our city. We're trying to be a responsible citizen for our environment. We did bi-weekly garbage collection so we can take truck off the road. And it's demonstrating that it's working well. But for us, we need maybe try to have those plastic back in the bin, because now we force people that they're not, so the residents of the city of Ottawa, they have no more excuse to say that we have yak factor, because now you can collect your food, we're making it convenient for you, you put it on your bag, throw it on your green bin, and it's gone every week. So I know the way I look at it, it's not a perfect solution, but for what we got in our hand and what we're trying to move forward, and it's good for us to look at it within a year and keep moving and monitoring. So I think I can support that motion. So thank you very much, staff. I know, and our legal department, it's been, the green bin program has been a hot item in the last 6-7 years, and I'm glad that at least we found some common ground. We can move forward. We stop costing the taxpayer more money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Hubert, I believe you wanted to just address the
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Earlier, the questions were asked about what the province was doing in regards to consultation on this. There's a paper out called Reducing Litter and Waste in Our Communities. It's a discussion paper put out by the new Minister of the Environment. There were several of us around council that took the opportunity when we were invited to meet with the Minister. I know you weren't available, but Councillor Menard had somebody from his office attend. Councillor DeRuse, myself, Councillor Chiarelli were there, and Marilyn, you were there for part of the discussions. And what they told us was the discussion paper was out there to gather input from councils and stakeholders, and then they would be rolling out a community consultation. So it is coming, and it deals with organics and compostables and making the manufacturers more responsible for their waste. So it covers off a whole lot of things that we've talked about here around the council. So I'm hoping that committee members will take the time to read that and comment on that discussion paper. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So no more questions from councillors. There's a bunch of factors to this decision. Oddly enough, I actually wasn't at council when we first made this decision. It's a 19-3 vote. Myself and Councillor Middick weren't there. It's funny because in my head I thought I supported it, but I did support it. I just wasn't there to actually cast a vote. When you're making a decision like this, there's no question that it's less than ideal to give another use to plastic bags. Now, giving another use to a plastic bag that you already own, by its very virtue, makes it not a single-use plastic, because you're giving a secondary use to that plastic that's already going to the landfill. You're going to hear a lot in several minutes when we get into the climate emergency discussion. You're going to hear a lot about the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That IPCC report speaks to landfill gas, and landfill gas is 50% CO2 and 50% methane. It also explains that methane, in terms of greenhouse gases, trapping heat in the atmosphere for the next 100 years, is 28 to 36 times more productive or efficient at capturing heat and keeping heat in the atmosphere over 100 years. I look at this as an opportunity to reduce that. It's getting organics out of the landfill, because we don't capture all the all the gases that come out of it. We do capture quite a bit, but we don't capture it all. By 2023, unless something changes at the provincial level, we're not supposed to have organics in the landfill. We want to take time to educate more people. We've been doing that for 10 years. I don't know a single person in my ward that is not familiar with what the green bin is. They all know what it is. They all know what can go in it. They don't use it. Not all of them. There's actually quite a bit. If you go drive the roads in Rideau Goulburn, you drive the roads in Barrhaven, you drive the roads in Orleans, you're going to see a lot of green bins. It's not enough. I've had residents specifically tell me that they would use it if they have this. There's studies. I know I'm going to say GLADS is a bit biased because they do sell plastic bags, but they have done municipal studies that shows the increase in diversion with the increase in plastic, with the introduction of plastic bags. I personally feel that this is a lesser of two evils. Knowing the bags are already there, we're just asking people to put them there a different way, but use them to a benefit to the city and a benefit to the landfill by putting them in at Orca World first. I get that that people disagree with me on that. I mean, the only way to prove it is to actually go ahead and do it and then see what the uptake is. I personally believe it's going to be significant. I know there's a lot of people out there that will start to use their green bin as a result of this change. I don't really have much more to add. I can't really. I just think it's an important change for us. If the province does go forward and ban single-use plastics, that changes the supply. We're not increasing supply. If there's no supply, there's no plastic bags to use. Right now, we know there are. If you can get more people conditioned to using the green bin, they're less likely to stop using the green bin if plastics become obsolete. Get people using the green bin while we have a chance. That's my opinion. I realize it's a divergent opinion from others. So on this, obviously, if you support the delay to look at it further, you vote yes, and if you don't support it, then you vote no. So on the motion, let me just bring it up here. Yeah, we'll do yeas and nays for sure. So at the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management, recommend Council approve that the City of Ottawa refrain from the introduction of single-use plastic bags into the green bin until such time that research into the effect of introducing single-use plastics to the green bin have been presented and fully considered by the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management. Yeas and nays.
Councillor, excuse me. Councillor Brockington?
No.
Councillor Cloutier?
No.
Councillor Darouz?
No.
Councillor Eglai?
No.
Councillor Hubley?
No.
Councillor McKinney?
Yes.
Councillor Menard?
Yes.
Chair Moffat?
No.
6-2, loses.
Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda, item number 6, City of Ottawa Declaration of Climate Emergency. So I actually want to, before we get to delegations on this, I want to ask people to be very direct in their comments. We have a number of delegations. Actually, we're at 11. We started at 14. There's a number of delegations on this. I want to try to avoid the use of rhetoric. Don't focus on anything but what's before this committee. There is a specific recommendation, set of recommendations in this that pertain to the City of Ottawa. I don't care what's happening in China. That's not relevant to this committee at this time with this report. I don't care that you might think the earth is flat and that climate change isn't real. I don't care. Please do not tell that to me at this committee because I don't want to hear it. We have a set of recommendations in front of us, and the focus of this committee should be on that. And I'm going to read it out right now so that we all know what we're talking about today. It's officially declared a climate emergency for the purposes of naming, framing, and deepening our commitment to protecting our economy and our ecosystems, our community from climate change. That's the definition of emergency we're dealing with today. That specific wording. Establish a council sponsors group. That's pretty straightforward. Direct city staff to include the following in the review and update of the AQCCMP. We heard earlier, the city is already working on the air quality climate change management plan and updating it, bringing it to council. This gives a more targeted approach and gives more direction to staff so they can focus on it. One of the biggest challenges we've had at this committee in recent years is lack of focus. We do a lot of reporting, a lot of study, but not much focus. We don't do anything tangible. This gives a bit more direction on that. Direct city staff, number 4, to include the following in the Energy Evolution Final Report. Again, Energy Evolution Final Report coming to this committee this year already. This gives more focus. That's not a bad thing. Number 5, direct city staff to report back within this year on a spending plan for the Hydro Ottawa dividend surplus. I've gotten emails that said, why are you spending $20 million from the hydro dividend? We're not. The $20 million goes to the revenue. This is the surplus, a surplus that council already approved a month ago that was going to go to this initiative. This gives it some direction. And I might be stern right now, but I'm getting a little sick and tired of emails that don't make sense and are completely irrelevant from the task at hand. Number 6, direct city staff to complete a vulnerability assessment and develop a climate resiliency strategy to reduce the impacts of changing climate. Earlier, we had the reports on the work plan. It included a climate resiliency strategy. That's not new. We're doing that. Again, more focus. Just nails it down. Number 7, recognize climate change as a strategic priority in the city's strategic plan and accompanying budget directions for the remaining term of council. For the past 2 terms, climate change has been a term of council priority. It's been a strategic priority. We haven't yet done that. It is a bit of queue jumping in terms of putting it as a strategic priority for this term of council, because we don't do the term of council priorities until June. The reality is, I don't see any scenario in which we don't include climate change as a term of council priority, and that we don't have it as a strategic initiative. So yes, it's queue jumping, but it's a pretty obvious queue to jump. And number 8, work with senior levels of government to accelerate ambition and action to meet the urgency of climate change and provide additional resources for municipalities and the public to reduce their GHG emissions and build resiliency to climate impacts. That's pretty straightforward. It's working with other levels of government. Let's be honest, they don't do a lot. So let's not tie our wagons to them too much. They like to talk a ton, but there's not much action going on. I'm not really certain what the federal government's done in the last 3 years. We talk about the great successes they've done. Okay, show me something. I'll give you my cell phone number, 613-894-1131. You give me a call if the federal government does anything on climate change. My guess is my phone's going to be silent for a long time. We should focus on stuff that we can do. We should focus on stuff in this city that's actual tangible. Things we can achieve at this city. Light rail is one of the biggest impacts on GHG emissions that we'll ever do in this city. No one seems to argue that we shouldn't do something with our transit system to make it better. The current change that we're in the process of 50% of our lights have been converted to LED. It's a pretty straightforward thing. Everyone seems to grasp that that's a good thing. That saves money, and that's beneficial to the environment. Those are tangible things that this council has done in recent years that fit this bill under this type of motion. So again, we'll get to the speakers. People can ask questions, but please stay focused on the task at hand. I don't want to hear rhetoric. I don't want to hear garbage. I'm not used to it. We just spent a long time on garbage. Let's be focused on the task at hand and be direct in the recommendations before us. Our first speaker is Rob Barnes from Ecology Ottawa. Following that will be Diane Beckett from Cafés. I want to say cafes, but I know you call it cafes. Cafes, can I say cafes? Thanks.
Good afternoon, Chair and Councillors. It's a pleasure to be here before you. I think my presentation will be fairly brief, short on rhetoric, to the point. We'd first like to start off, though, by thanking the many people who came out this morning and are in this room to encourage us all to be bold, to be ambitious, to be daring in terms of our policy ambition. The reality is we have some plans underway at the City of Ottawa. We still do not yet have a clear policy agenda to get us from where we are right now in 2019 to where we need to go in 2050, which is an 80% reduction from 2012 emissions. So today's motion, as you say, Chair, has some substantial pieces that we hope will move the needle on this. We want Ottawa to join the wave of cities declaring unanimously across Canada climate emergencies, and many of you have already have that list. You know, Vancouver, Halifax, Hamilton, Kingston, 300 Quebec municipalities. So we want Ottawa to get on the train, so to speak, and get on it fast. The pieces of this motion that are not purely symbolic, really, we count 4 main ones. Equity considerations, incorporating that into our understanding of climate change and how we deal with it. That's critical for helping seniors get around the city, helping low-income residents of our city, helping people with mobility issues, helping anyone who's on the front lines of climate impacts, and we'll see more and more of those as the years go on. The other piece, as the Chair mentioned, term of council priorities. We want this to be more than a symbolic piece of the term of council priorities. Last time we have climate change mentioned. This time we'd like climate change to really be framing how the City of Ottawa goes about its policy priorities in the term of council priorities. The third piece is aligning our targets or researching the IPCC targets and seeing the extent to which our targets actually line up with the science, because as we know, the science moves quickly, so we will need to look at where we are relative to the science. As you know, our current targets are just aligned with the provincial targets, and that might be out of date, so we should look into that, and that's what this motion proposes. Finally, climate resilience plan. I think the chair is very right in saying that the city is already moving in that direction. The problem there is that we've been moving in that direction for a really, really long time, and we have not yet seen a plan. So, as the chair said, you know, we'd like to see motion, and we hope that this specific resolution moves that forward more than it otherwise would be. We firmly believe that there's still time to build a better city while tackling climate change. It does mean transit, as the chair suggests. It does mean walkability. It means more complete communities. It means integrating green infrastructure into our city, into our streets, into our roofs. And it means there are economic opportunities as well in terms of retrofits, energy efficiency upgrades, and that's an economic boom that's actually just waiting to happen in the city. It takes some upfront investment, but we know, as Hydro Ottawa has proven, that you can retrofit and get a lot of money back in the long run. So there is actually a business case for many of these items as well. Finally, cities matter, and Ottawa can be a leader. Cities are indirectly or directly responsible for about half of the emissions in this country. Ottawa needs to step up to the plate and lead, and we thank you very much for taking the time to consider the motion, and we urge you to vote in favor of it today. Thank you.
Thank you much, Mr. Burns. Any questions for the delegation? No? Pardon me? Well, I've already told them they can't clap. No one's booing. No, I mean, to control it. I can't go out there and beat them up. But no, I've told them they can't clap. All right. Thank you. Diane Beckett. Followed by Curtis Lavoie, and then Jerry Fiore.
Chair and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on the climate emergency motion. I represent the Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability, or CAFEs, which comprises over 50 community associations across the city. Report after report tells us that addressing climate change is both feasible and affordable, and that all we are missing to achieve it is political will. Thank you. I'll have to get used to clicking too. And increasing numbers of cities all across Canada are showing us that they have the political will, including the cities listed here who have already signed climate emergency motions. And it is truly a climate emergency that we are facing. We only have till 2030, that's 11 and a half years, to cut the carbon pollution we're dumping into the atmosphere by 45%. And we need to completely stop using our atmosphere as a garbage dump and reduce our emissions to zero by 2050. As Greta, and the student climate strikers remind us the world is burning and our children's future is at risk. For 30 years, we have dragged our feet on addressing climate change, and now we are feeling its impacts here in Ottawa and around the world. Ottawa has experienced an increase in severity and frequency of extreme weather. This chaos is only a preview of what is to come unless we quickly address climate change. Time is of the essence for concerted action. 2030, the first climate emergency milestone, is only 3 terms of City Council away, and we have to make sure that we have made significant progress in each and every term of Council by then. The climate emergency motion that is before the City is the essential first step. We also need to follow up with a climate action plan, which identifies how we reach the climate target, allocates necessary funds and staff, monitors if we are on track, ensures accountability, integrates climate action across all city activities, ensures climate action is a term of council priority for 2018 to 2022, and uses the official planning process to create a comprehensive approach to addressing climate change. The good news is that much groundwork has already been laid in Ottawa. Energy Evolution Phase 1 and 2 are identifying evidence-based options, concrete steps, and policies for a low-carbon economy. And SSG's Energy Supply Consumption and Emissions Modeling Initiative is identifying co-benefits for public health, local economic development, employment, and poverty reduction if options are thoughtfully executed. There are also community education and business initiatives and expertise in Ottawa already moving us to a low-carbon economy. There's Carbon 613, CELIS, which built the first passive multi-unit affordable housing building in a northern climate, the Renewable Energy and Co-Share Co-ops, Algonquin College's construction retrofit program, LeBreton Flats proposed district heating hookup, and lots more. And a growing range of sources of investment are emerging that can support the city's climate actions, including the newly announced Low Carbon Cities Canada Fund, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Municipal Fund, and the federal government's Low Carbon Economy Fund. In addition, the economics for addressing climate change are increasingly shifting in the right direction. So climate change is not just an emergency, although it is a very real emergency, it is also an opportunity. Climate change is a social issue and it affects the economy, health, and ecosystems. Thus, by addressing climate change, Ottawa also has an opportunity to make a better city. And here are some practical and tangible examples. We can create local green jobs that address energy efficiency, renewables, and building retrofits. We can reduce costs by considering the life cycle costs, not just upfront costs. We can manage climate risk and invest in climate change preparedness, adaptation, and resiliency. We can reduce plastics as they have a huge carbon footprint from resource extraction through to production and disposal. Electric vehicles, recycling reusable rather than disposable items such as diapers, and a focus on green procurement are also climate issues. These last issues were also agenda items today. So I'll skip over this, but there are things happening, but Mr. Moffat asked that we focus on what we can do here today. So CAFE agrees with Councillor Sean Menard about his motion, and these are the community associations that support the climate emergency motion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's funny, you had a slide that had China in it.
Pardon?
Actually meant, you had a slide that had China in it, and
I skipped it for you, but we can go back and I can fill it in the details if you want.
I actually meant the people that, why are we doing anything? China sucks. That's what I meant, but anyways.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Yeah. I misunderstood it.
It's all good. It's easy to misunderstand me. I speak too fast sometimes. All right, so any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, thank you very much for taking the time to come here today. So Curtis Lavoie.
Is there a slide clicker?
Yeah.
Trying to steal our equipment?
We'll get you set up there. All right, Dr. Lavoie, you have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Dr. Curtis Lavoie. I'm an emergency physician at the Children's Hospital, as well as at the Marlborough Hospital, where I've been working for about 18 years. So I'm going to talk to the question of really, is this an emergency? Like I said, I'm an emergency physician. My expertise, I think, is sort of seeing and dealing with emergencies and trying to identify them before they happen. I guess I just kind of have one major point, and I'll start by saying this. You've identified the IPCC as the main sort of scientific body that's evaluating and making conclusions based on the existing science on climate. And their latest report in December, as other people have said, has given us about 11 years before we have to, 11 years to really turn around this climate sort of catastrophe. Now, I want to point out that the report specifically talks about certain ecosystems and really the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius. In order to sort of maintain or get under that 1.5 degrees of warming, we're going to really need to make a major sort of overhaul of our society, talking about dramatic changes in sort of all aspects of society to be able to do that, and do that within 10 years, or else we're going to miss that target. And if we miss that target, we're looking at 2 degrees or 3 degrees. In the slide here, I'm just illustrating what that looks like in terms of our carbon emissions. Specifically, the major factor here is the time to turn around. How long is it going to take us for us to turn around our emissions? The report specifically talks about coral reefs and other ecosystems. This is an illustration of what they talk about. The time to turn around, if we can get under that 1.5 degree turnaround, meaning a complete transformation in the next 10 years, we can probably save about 15 to 20% of our coral reefs. If we miss that target, they're almost certain to die out completely. So again, the time to turn around is crucial when it comes to the coral reefs. If we miss the 2 degree turnaround, it's really just a matter of counting the days. So this illustrates how survival of the coral reefs is really tied to the turnaround. We can see in this graph, if we can turn around our carbon emissions in 10 years, we can probably save some of the coral reefs. In the red is probably several other ecosystems and species that are undoubtedly going to meet their demise. And then to the right, the dashed lines are really all the other ecosystems in the world that are sensitive to carbon and climate. And really, all of us are sensitive to carbon and the climate. And it's just a matter of where are we on the curve, and including ourselves. So this is my main point, that we are a species that is vulnerable to carbon emissions, and we need to understand what's happening in our climate because our survival is at stake. So how come this is a problem? Well, climate change, admittedly, doesn't have a huge direct impact on mortality. We all think, well, 2 degrees, it'll vary by 10 or 20 degrees in a day. I can imagine just getting an extra air conditioner. It's true that we may have a few increase in heat stroke and Lyme disease in the summer months. That things that we can fight easily with antibiotics and air conditioning. However, we've got to realize that there's a huge impact that's very diverse on food and water and infrastructure as a result of storms and droughts and fires that are compounded by their effects on security. Security meaning basically conflicts derived from resource restriction, which is the main cause of conflicts in the history of mankind. This in turn has other effects that sort of compound each other, and then those are the impacts that are going to have the major influence on our society and on our mortality.
1 minute?
Yep, 1 minute, thank you. I think there's a very stark example in the Middle East over the last 15 years, where Syria and the region suffered a huge record-breaking drought, and the ensuing destruction was sort of unprecedented. I think it's a stark example of, you know, a major factor, albeit there are other factors that led to a huge destruction. I think the question really is just, where are we on that curve? You know, it's very hard to know. I made an illustration here of where we might be on the curve. But the important point is that each day we delay significant action on climate change is having a mortality detriment down the road. And that's why I think this is an emergency. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you for your presentation. Any questions? You have a question? Yes, Councillor Hubley.
Thank you. I'm sorry, this last one, you're saying 790 million dead. When's that occurring?
So this is an illustration. The science from the IPCC really is looking at the easy-to-examine systems like the coral reefs and a few other sort of select ecosystems and species. We already know polar bears and a lot of other species are at risk. If I can go back to the slide here previously, basically, the system is very complex, you know, and we only have one patient. I'm the benefit. I don't know if you've ever been to the hospital or taken a medication or been the benefit of any kind of medical care, but I work in a system that's based on hundreds of years of thousands and thousands of reports on probably millions of patients, where we have the benefit of interventions and trial and error and great observations. The difference we have here now is we have basically one patient, and the best we can do is to look at some of the very select species that are open to us and are showing their vulnerabilities to us. The complexity of human existence on this planet is much beyond our capacity. It's trillions of times more complex than a human body. I'm saying that simply that there's a relationship here between carbon emission turnaround and the mortality of our human species. And I can't tell you when that's going to happen, but I can tell you that there's shallow slopes where maybe a day delay means a few thousand people more will die, and there's going to be steep parts where it's hundreds, probably times higher than that. And at some point, our society is going to make that turnaround, and we have to do it as soon as possible.
So the question was, when are you predicting this 790 million dead? Like, is there a timeline to what you're predicting here?
I'm saying there's no way of knowing. It could be, it's not, this is an eventual timeline. If you follow my argument, I'm saying that the time to turn around determines how many people are going to die. If we turn around in 10 years, we're probably doing pretty well. If we turn around in 20 years and we're looking at 2 degrees or 3 degrees of warming, we're not going to do very well. I don't know when the 790 million people will die. I'm saying it's a scary point, and it may be larger than that. And it's impossible to know when that will be.
Are you aware of anybody that to date has died from the climate change, or any animal that's gone extinct because of it?
Can you please, everyone, okay, when you speak here at committee, I don't allow people to yell in the background while you're speaking. I don't care who's in the room. I don't care what side they're on. When you're speaking, I don't allow people to speak when you're speaking. I'd expect that same respect for anyone up on this table and any speaker here. So when someone says something, I don't care if you disagree with it. Please keep it to yourself.
So the question is, has climate change caused any deaths yet that you're aware of? Because obviously you've read a lot of studies to come to this kind of conclusion.
Climate change has definitely caused deaths. Because it's a very complex system, it's hard to parcel out what the emissions from carbon are causing exactly. We know that the number of storms and droughts and forest fires are increasing significantly, probably fivefold over the last 40 years, and that we've had fairly significant mortalities from heat emergencies in Quebec last summer, and we've had a lot of infrastructure damage from tornadoes in Ottawa and floods in the Ottawa region and across the country. I can tell you that scientists have to deal with to come to a conclusion of high certainty requires a very simple system with a very simple input and output. We know that the climate is changing. We know that people are dying more from climate emergencies, and the climate is caused by human emissions. The climate change and catastrophes that we're going to be seeing is caused by human emissions.
Okay, and finally, a question to you. Your listing here is CHEO. Is this research you're doing as part of CHEO's work, or that's just where you work?
This is where I work. I work at the Children's Hospital in the emergency department.
Okay, so this isn't a CHEO
this is not a
report or anything. It's your personal.
This is not a CHEO report. No.
Okay, so you're working in the emergency room. One of the things we got, I think most councils around this table got it during this discussion about climate emergency. There's several that come to mind for me of young people that are talking about suicide because of the discussion that's going around that the world's going to end in 10 years if we don't do something. So a statement like this, that 790 million are going to be dead, not sure when, but it's coming real soon. You don't see that in your emergency room, that people are coming in with this? Because it's happening at CHEO, so I guess it's really not your room.
I can tell you with certainty there's no such talk or suicidal patients because of climate change. What I can tell you, though, is the children are rising up, and they don't want your hope. They want you to panic. They want you to feel the fear that they feel and that I feel, and they want you to act.
Okay, thank you. It's different than what we've been told. We were contacted, I know I got emails, I'm assuming the others did, from some young people that are asking us, why are we saying these things? Where's the need to do scary numbers like that, for example. So you're comfortable with it, you're not seeing it in your emergency room, that's all you could testify to. So,
thanks for the question. I've come to the conclusion that it's important to speak the truth and to really communicate where this is all leading. The science is never going to elucidate an exact outcome, but it is warning and very telling that the coral reefs and a lot of other species are dying off, and very predictably dying off. And we are vulnerable as a human and a very dependent human on this planet.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor DeRuse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Lavoie, thanks for your speaking today, but my question to you is, are you trying, this is a very good start, and I'm very happy with your presentation. Are you trying to tell us that the federal government is not doing a good job on making sure fighting climate change, and we're doing extra stuff that we were seeing lately on, we were just charged the gas tax, and we saw what it did on the gas, on the pumps, and we're paying now extra, and that was downloaded to our taxpayer. I'm just wondering, this is something the city is doing that, or this is something globally?
Can you maybe state that again? What precisely is your question?
So the question to you is, are you trying to say that our federal government is not doing enough good job on fighting our climate change?
No.
Thank you. And the $400 million that the provincial government that is just implementing to help with, in the last budget last week, they brought $400 million for emission reduction that we're going to talk to our senior management and all the municipality to work with our municipal level to talk to our provincial level to be able to find out where does the funding come and how we can improve our climate change in the cities. So that's not good enough too?
I'm not sure, what you think my expertise is in terms of spending money, but I can tell you that the transformation has to be huge. Is if $400 million seems like a large number, but spread across many millions of people, I'm not sure that that's going to be adequate.
Can we agree on one thing, that climate change is a global issue?
Climate change is a global issue, but I want to emphasize that the only way that this is going to change is with individual action.
Sure.
Because the big political movements are powerless in the face of any sort of doubt.
So in your mind, the City of Ottawa residents are not responsible resident enough to do what we are doing so far, and we need to increase that.
The City of Ottawa...
You just said that we have to do it as an individual. Mm-hmm. So I'm asking you, are you looking at the City of Ottawa resident right now and we're not doing, so we're not responsible enough to the climate? Is that what you're trying to say?
That's not what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so my other question to you, you said there is only one patient, right? And well, I just would like to tell you from this committee, there is only one taxpayer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Lavoie, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Jerry Fiore, who is the chair of the Ottawa Disability Coalition. And then Trevor Haché. Is Trevor still here? Trevor Haché? No? So then it'll be Emily Tamman.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak. Yes, I'm Jerry Fiore. I'm a resident of Maryville Gardens and Ward 9, but yes, I am the chair of the Ottawa Disability Coalition. On April 8th, I sent in an email to you. It was entitled Climate Emergency Karen Story, and I was asked to speak on her behalf because she's unable to come to the meeting, and all that. So I'm going to quote a little story of hers on the effects of heat on her. And that, so people with MS, multiple sclerosis, are the canaries in the climate change coal mine. What we experience today, the average person may experience tomorrow. Many of us MSers, particularly those with primary progressive form like myself, have heat sensitivity. Not long ago, I would be housebound for 2 weeks because of heat waves. I thought that was bad until last summer when I was stuck in for 6 weeks. And I did what the city suggested and adapted. The only daylight hours that I was able to tolerate was between 5 and 9. So I would sleep in my clothes so I could get out and water my plants and take a drive through the garden before it got too warm. Then it was indoor life. I couldn't take OC Transpo because the weight and the heat caused vision problems. I had no choice but to further contribute to greenhouse gases by taking paratranspo. The email subsequently asked you, councillors, to approve the motion, and then she provided a series of recommendations based on what Vancouver had done in terms of bylaws, trying to make it much better for the greenhouse gases and climate change, any contribution to that. So now I want to tell you a story about myself as well. At the end of October 2017, there was a tremendous downpour that happened. And my understanding is there was about 2,000 households and businesses in Ottawa that were flooded, including mine. I had 2 backup systems in my sump to prevent that from happening, but the volume of water was tremendous and the power was out for 5 hours, so nothing sustained, and I had a flood. So immediately after that, I made arrangements to have a whole home natural gas generator installed on my house. And I put 2 bigger sump pumps into the sump. So when the tornado hit last September, my house was fine, and I had no issues. And either did my neighbor, who plugged his sump pump into my outlets, stuff like that. So that was the preparation, unplanned for, not expecting a tornado, but lo and behold, I was safe because of that. So I asked you, what is the city doing to prepare for the effects of climate change? And what is the city doing to reduce our cities and its residents' contribution to climate change? And I acknowledge that the LRT is a good step in reducing our carbon footprint. And maybe the LRT is designed to withstand the greater heat, lightning, rainfall, ice, snow, freezing rain, and wind conditions associated with climate change. But I can assure you that many people with disabilities and seniors will be suffering, likely trapped in their homes for longer periods. They and many other LRT users will be unable to get to their normal destinations, including the LRT, and indeed from the LRT to their destinations.
1 minute, sir.
Because of the more extreme conditions in it. The heat warnings of last summer and the icy paths and sidewalks of this past winter attest to the problem. It's here now. For the city of Ottawa to be age-friendly, safe, healthy, accessible, inclusive, and the most livable city in Canada, it must do more to address the causes and the effects of climate change. Start now by passing the climate emergency motion and establishing an integrated climate action plan. The Standing Committee on Environmental Protection must take the lead and bring the other standing committees and a full council on board to address the diverse issues of climate change, which have already hit us and are going to get worse. And I'll add that accessibility is 100% tied into the climate that we operate in. So if I go out and have to be on my scooter in a snowstorm and it's not cleared, I can't get by. But I can drive. But there's a lot of other people that rely 100% on walkers, on other types of scooters and mobility aids. They can't get through the heat. It's too hot to walk in the summer in the sun, and it's too icy in the wintertime. Anyways, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Egley, I had a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's more a comment, Jerry. I just want to thank you for coming down today, because a lot of the information we've received, a lot of the emails and presentations we've received on the subject have been about statistics and facts and figures, and they're all important, but you brought a different perspective here, and you put a really, very much a human face on the discussion we're having here today. So I want to thank you for that, because it puts a different lens, it puts a different perspective, and it makes the topic, I think, a lot more real. You can put a lot of big numbers on a piece of paper, and again, they're relevant and they're important, but to hear real life stories about what the impact is and what the impact could be going forward. So I want to thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Fury. Emily Salmon. Of course, I'll give you a second. And then after Emily, it will be Guy Annable, who is still here, Sam Boswell and Carrie Glines Elliott. They here? Solid. Hello.
Hi there.
Long time no see. Actually, literally, that's usually you say that when you saw someone yesterday. I haven't seen you
in a while,
so
sir.
no, it's been a while. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you. I do very much hope, Mr. Chair, that my comments today won't be dismissed as rhetorical, because I do mean them in all sincerity and earnestness today.
I will cut you off vociferously if
Your power controlling the mic. I come before you today as a woman with many identities. I'm a resident of Ottawa, a lawyer, a spouse, a community activist, and a political candidate, and I do hope you won't hold the latter against me. But I am here today to address you primarily as the mother of 3 young children. I am very worried about their future, for the future of all our children. And while I generally consider myself to be a positive and optimistic person, I'm terrified that we're going to squander the limited opportunity that we have left to take meaningful action to avoid climate catastrophe. As you've heard many times today, the world's top climate scientists say we have fewer than 12 years to lower our carbon emissions dramatically. According to the IPCC report, the cases of extreme weather are only going to increase and will pale compared with what's to come. Extreme flooding and drought, devastating storms and fires, the human and economic impacts of inaction will be staggering. These are not abstract global phenomena. These are issues that will continue to impact us right here in Ottawa. Yes, there is a price tag that goes along with taking real action on climate change, but we can't afford an increase in the flooding and maybe even tornadoes that we've seen here in Ottawa in recent years. Given this unbelievably short timeline, it is imperative that our City Council show true leadership with an ambitious plan backed by the necessary resources to act. I think it's important to acknowledge the work that City Council has done over the years in the fight against climate change. There have been a number of reports and plans produced, all of which I know have been well-intended and entered into in good faith, but we haven't seen the kinds of reductions in our emissions that the science now tells us we urgently need. The leadership of this committee is so important to all our futures. I urge you to please put aside your differences for the greater good of our communities. We are living in increasingly complicated political times, with hyperpartisanship, toxic rhetoric, and the spread of misinformation threatening our democracy and the future of our planet. Twitter squabbles and efforts to undermine our political opponents are like sport to some in this city, and I will confess to having been guilty of it at times myself. But this is not a game. The consequences of inaction here are real and they're devastating. This is not the time for incremental change. There is just simply too much on the line. We can't keep tinkering on the margins of the status quo. I urge you to take the important and necessary step of declaring a climate emergency. This is not a symbolic measure. It's an important policy decision that will frame how we move forward and position Ottawa as a leader among Canadian municipalities. I often hear the refrain that the LRT will give rise to the single largest reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions in our city's history. This is really important, and I don't want to minimize it in any way. But we have to expand our ambition when it comes to matters like LRT. That means improvements, more investments in transit. It means having the audacity to consider measures like free public transit and widespread expansion of our cycling infrastructure. It means aggressively tackling our retrofit plans, not only for new and existing municipal buildings, but to use every planning and zoning tool available to encourage the greening of all buildings in our cities. It will inevitably mean that we have to give some things up, to make the tough choices that your constituents elected you to make in the public interest, and frankly, at this point, in the interests of humanity. With this motion, you have an opportunity to ensure that we're on the right side of history, so we can tell our children and our grandchildren that we did every single thing we could. So please, please, take this important first step, adopt this motion, and urge your council colleagues to do the same. Declaring a climate emergency will have certain costs, but the cost of inaction, the cost of only tinkering with the status quo is far greater than any of us can afford. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I hope you will adopt the motion.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there's any questions for you. I know, like the Twitter squabbles, like I can't stand people that do that. I would never.
Never, sir.
Ever.
Me neither.
Get involved in a Twitter squabble, especially on Sundays. I'm pretty sure you wrote that with me in mind.
I'm always very cordial on Twitter.
So am I. At least I think I am, but other people just disagree with me. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So, Guy Annable. I think we might have had a Twitter squabble once or twice.
Thank you. Through the chair, before we get started, I just wanted to make 1-2 comments before the timer started. And they're positive, very positive comments, Scott. First of all, thank you very much for the levity that you have brought to this committee and your lightheartedness in dealing with some of the issues. I did take into consideration your removing the rhetoric from my 8-page diatribe here, and I really don't have that much left.
So it's not one page, exactly.
To continue that levity, I went through it after your recital of what you didn't want to hear, and half my presentation is gone. So interestingly enough, I did want to try and respect that before we get started. Another quick comment. I'm a bit confused before we get started on the timer. We were supposed to see a solid waste strategy plan in the first 6 months of 2019. I sat in this room with a couple of these members. Has it now been put off, or is it because of the provincial new government? What is the story on actually getting to what some of the councillors here are trying to achieve in a new long-term solid waste management or strategy? So I'm a bit confused.
Your time has started, so I just want to be clear on that. But there was no plan to have it done in the first 6 months of 2019. The plan is to bring the roadmap for how we see it going forward in the first 6 months of 2019. So that will come to this committee within the couple months.
Just for the record, I was misunderstood, because I was in this room 7 months ago before the election, and they said in the first 6 months of 2019, we will have a new solid waste strategy.
Yeah, I think what you might have heard or what you might have misunderstood was that the plan was to kick it off.
I see. So we're 3 or 4 years out. 2023, I think you mentioned?
Well, no. We need 18 months to do a procurement process, right? So we need something done by really the start of 2022 to have in place so that we can then start a procurement process for, yeah, it started, but I'm answering. All right, go ahead.
So through the chair, may I ask to reset the clock so that I'm not taken up from my reduced
It was only
time?
20 seconds, so just go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity of addressing my local municipal government today. The 11-page motion presented by Councillor Sean Menard about 2 weeks ago, I asked myself a couple of questions. What can this new shiny emergency declaration, new money, and a new sponsored committee with councillor actually affect climate change within municipal boundaries and within the city of Ottawa? And it's the same question I ask when I pick up the gas pump or pick up groceries in a carbon-taxed Canada. I feel that this is a social justice exercise that mimics the perfectly federal playbook that with an initial starting cost of $250,000 to the taxpayers, as I understand it today, and a sponsored new committee of 6 people on top of the Environment Committee. And from what I've heard from Kevin Wiley today and all the people, we've already integrated green strategies and a green lens through all the committees and city operations. So again, you know, I'm just a bit confused about that. But they said it was only going to be 4 cents a litre, too. I don't know if Mr. Menard has seen the Vancouver gas prices this morning, but it's killing us in the transportation and the agriculture industry. While the goals and methods of reducing carbon-based emissions and pollution within the boundaries of the City of Ottawa are very laudable and honourable goals, Ottawa has the largest municipal landmass boundary in Canada, and it presents some obvious obstacles for the citizenry who must access it in our vehicles. We all have to work. We all have to get around. It's a big shitty, Sean. To work, to pay the property taxes, the rising rink fees, and all that we do to continue to pay in this city to get us through our daily lives in Ottawa. Most of us need a car, or a truck, or a heavy truck in my case, to provide the progressive collective with the taxes that we need to feed it. We do it just to do our jobs. You can't study or produce a made-up report by Sunnyway's scientists on April the 1st to coincide with the anniversary or this launch of the carbon tax. And if you believe otherwise, read your comments on CFRA, Councillor Menard. I think they were disingenuous. And again, I think it's laudable and honorable to sit here and to think these things up for your own image and device and narratives, and look inward at city operations and all the facets of transportation and carbon areas within the city operations which we can affect. But every other committee already has green and sustainable language in their mandates, terms of committee references, and everything they perform in each city committee in Ottawa. So I simply ask, what can declaring a climate emergency do but adding cost to the taxpayer and the people who pay the taxes in this climate collective in the city of Ottawa that benefit from the circle of funding they so depend on, and what actually produce actually produce lowering carbon emissions. And to reduce the overall impact, we already do it. The recent carbon tax is a perfect example. But Sean, yet to create more cost and bureaucracy in this building with no appreciable result to city ratepayers or the climate as a whole is just a big word salad. And progressives feeling good exercise that actually does nothing to reduce greenhouse gases. Does that sound familiar? Now I would like to move to some real emergencies in Ottawa, in the city of Ottawa. We have a number of them. And we continue to have a number of them for years. Real emergencies. Affordable housing in the greater Ottawa area is the single biggest challenge in limiting growth and the potential of this city.
Mr. Annable, the motion before it has a specific
Very good. Councillor, I'll finish up.
definition of what emergency is in this case.
Okay, so no affordable housing. Can I get my slide up then? So we can't talk about affordable housing emergency. So we'll move right on to my slide. And we'll move right on to this next emergency. The roads, okay, that's an emergency, but we can't talk about that. It's about the climate emergency. Okay, can you scroll down on that? There we go there. We spent $230 million on a cistern and a project that took 10 years to create. It's called the Ottawa River Action Plan. It was a great idea. Too bad the collective couldn't get together, because there's all the municipalities on the screen that still dump raw sewage into the Ottawa or St. Lawrence River. Imagine if we would have spent $230 million on affordable housing. If we had heroes like Roger Greenberg's father that actually built affordable housing in this city. But no, we spent $230 million on a cistern and a holding plant that treats water out of our sewage system when 13 other communities dump sewage into the same river. Wow. There's a lot of emergencies in this city. Climate emergency is very important, but you know what? We have a shelter that has 1,000 people every night, and we have an emergency shelter that needs an emergency shelter.
All right, so your time is up.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor, for all your time and sitting here for 5.5 hours. I really appreciate my opportunity to address my municipal government, and good luck with the emergencies in this city. I wish you all well with them.
Just to clarify for the public or anyone listening, $250,000.
I don't assume there's any questions?
No,
I guess there's no questions?
not for you, no.
No.
Thank you. Just to be clear, the $250,000 that was referenced is the potential surplus from the hydro dividend. I mentioned that at the start. And we've already approved that would spend that. $250,000 is a lot less than the $140 million we're going to spend on infrastructure renewal this year, and it's a lot less than the $195 million we're going to spend on infrastructure renewal 5 years from now.
Then why are we still putting 55%? Do you want me to drive?
Right.
Let's not talk about our world. You'll lose every time.
You want to leave? Thanks. Bye. The next person is Sam Boswell and Carrie Glines-Elliott. Glines-Elliott, is that right?
Glines, that's correct.
Good stuff. All right, thank you.
Okay, is my mic on? It is on. So I'm Sam Boswell, this is Carrie Glines-Elliott. We are here speaking on behalf of ourselves, but we are also two of the founders of Ottawa Transit Riders, and we've met some of you before. We are here to, obviously, to address the climate emergency, and we actually have a deck that talks about things that city can actually do to help with this, and not surprisingly, it's transit related. So I will turn it over to Carrie, who will walk us through our deck.
Hi. Okay, the microphone is working. So what I want to say is there's often a question about whether climate change is really an emergency, and the slide that I have up right now I think really indicates that climate change is an emergency. It's also very, very expensive. The information up here is money that is spent on insurance. As you can see, the graph goes up and up. This says that Canada's Disaster Financial Assistance Program spent more money between 2009 2009 and 2015, which is only a 6-year period, than they had spent in the previous 39 years, and it's only gotten worse. So when people talk about whether we can afford to deal with climate change, I would argue that actually climate change is going to be very, very expensive, and we can't afford to ignore it. I realize that climate change is very scary, and sometimes people like to ask themselves whether they really want to deal with it, or sometimes they ask themselves which government should really be dealing with it, right? Shouldn't this be a problem of international organizations, or federal government, or provincial government? We're here talking specifically about what the municipal government can do, and we're here talking about transit, because no other level of government has as much influence on transit. And we think that promoting public transit is one of the best things we can do for dealing with climate change. And so we're very much in favor of declaring it an emergency, but we're also very much in favor of actually talking about what the cities can do. So one of the things about public transit is that getting people out of private cars and into public buses helps us deal with traffic, helps us deal with problems with parking, local businesses benefit, it reduces pollution, and obviously it also helps with climate change. I'm going to skip through this very quickly because you said very clearly you didn't want to be talking about other places, but other cities that have declared climate emergencies have done really, really well in encouraging people to switch from private cars into other modes of transportation, both transit, cycling, and walking. Vancouver has done a really good job. I'm going to skip right over Seattle because you said you didn't want to talk about other places, and I'm going to talk about Ottawa. So the question is, what is Ottawa doing? Well, maybe some of you read the article in yesterday's Ottawa Citizen about the transit situation in Ottawa. Our transit system is deteriorating. In the meantime, we also have rising fares, and the result is a drop in ridership. If I were an economist and I were trying to encourage people to get off transit and into private cars, this is kind of the plan I would follow, and I'm not sure it's really what we should be doing. I would really like to see a lot more emphasis on the city level about making our transit a bit better. So here's what I'm suggesting that Ottawa needs to do, beyond just suggesting for declaring a climate emergency, but specifically dealing with transit. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see a lot more incentives for people to choose alternatives, and maybe rising costs for people who choose private cars. Sam, over to you.
So that's what we think about the climate emergency and some suggestions on how to fix it. If you agree with us, and I'm addressing the people behind me as well, please come and work with Ottawa Transit Riders. We are founding our group on April 27th here at City Hall. We're hoping that everybody I'm looking at will also be partners in working to improve transit and use transit to actually address climate change. And in summary, I think it's fairly clear, but we really hope you support this motion. We're big fans.
All right, thank you. We actually did put a tax on large parking lots. It's called the stormwater fee.
Yes, I'm aware. That's actually why it was sort of suggested as a possibility to raise revenue and also to sort of encourage people not to use their private cars.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none? Thank you. Thank you for your time. Our next speaker is Chloe Rourke, and then Mia, I want to say Bezier, but I don't know. Is that wrong? I feel Bayer. I was going to say Bayer, then I wasn't sure, but that year after Chloe. Of course, I picked the wrong one. You know, I get called MoFat a lot, so it's like it's the same thing. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I'll just start by saying that I am not an expert. I'm not a member of a community organization. I am only here because I am extremely concerned as a citizen who spends an unhealthy amount of time reading climate science. It terrifies me to think about the future that I will face in my lifetime and the future that any potential children that I have will face within their lifetime. And I think it should terrify all of us. So I don't really understand that how anyone who's read the science on climate can look at the IPCC report, look at all the different projections that exist currently, and not consider it to be an emergency. because the science is very, very clear that if we continue on the path that we are now, we are not just facing a catastrophe. That catastrophe, that crisis is happening almost inevitably within the next 50 years. That's almost certain that we will face a crisis, we will face a catastrophe, and it'll be up to us as a society to determine how we want to manage that and how we want to deal with it. But if we continue on the trajectory that Canada is currently on, we are going to be facing almost certain extinction by the end of 2100. We are currently on a trajectory of 4 degrees of warming, which is beyond any of the projections that we've seen to date. And that absolutely terrifies me. And I'm continuing to see both provincial and federal politicians from both the Liberal and Conservative Party fail to take meaningful action. Any action that is taken is incremental and, very, very gradual and small and completely inadequate to deal with the crisis that we are facing currently. And if anything, it's causing less urgency to deal with the problem because they're not naming or describing exactly what we are facing accurately. So that's the first thing I want to say. I know that we were asked not to use rhetoric wherever possible, but I'm having trouble not using that rhetoric, and I think it's important to realize the real human impact of what this emergency means. And to consider that, even 2 degrees of warming, which could, again, easily happen within the next 30 to 50 years, would mean widespread crop failure, extreme heat to making parts of Asia and Africa completely unlivable, major flooding of major cities in North America to the point where New York, London, parts of Toronto, and other cities like Miami or San Francisco will be completely unlivable for people, and a likely economic crisis or a complete economic collapse, and all the extra conflict and climate refugees that will result from all these problems. Not to mention that once we reach 2 degrees, there's a number of feedback loops that make it very, very difficult to prevent further warming beyond that, and it becomes difficult for it to be managed within human control. So the reason that I took one of my very few vacation days to come here to speak to you is to say that I really hope that you vote for this motion, but I really hope that it's not just a vote of approval, that this is a step towards taking the radical action that needs to happen in order to prevent this from being our future. And that includes rapidly moving towards a carbon neutral environment, both within municipal levels and broader. It means engaging with our provincial and federal leaders who are not currently taking proper action on this issue. And it's about reminding yourself that as a political leader, there is no, whether you ran for office because climate change was a priority to you doesn't matter anymore, because it is the only priority that will matter 20 years from now. Nothing else we do will matter if we don't fix this problem, and every level of government everywhere in the world needs to take it seriously. It's not enough to blame other countries. It's not enough to abdicate responsibility. It's not enough to use all the intellectual crutches that we use to deflect or dismiss the reality, because the reality is coming whether we like it or not, and it doesn't matter what political party you belong to, because all of us will have to deal with the implications and the effects. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rourke, for coming and for taking the time to have your day off and be here with us and waiting for this entire time to speak with us. It does make a big difference. And just speaking personally, for me, this is very much a start of what we need to do in this municipality, not the end. I'm not sure if there's other comments from folks that want to mention or ask questions. Okay, thank you very much for coming, and appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
The next delegation, I'll turn it back to Chair Moffat.
Mia Bayer. Followed by Andrew Lumsden. Andrew Lumsden? No, yeah, not yet. Just you're next. And then Bill Eggertson. My favorite Jock Trail resident. Just don't tell the other Jock Trail residents. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Mia Bayer. I've just turned 16 years old, and I'm the founder of Future Rising Ottawa, a youth-led and organized climate justice group who have been protesting in front of Parliament Hill every Friday since early January in solidarity with the thousands of youth around the world demanding their governments take serious climate action to protect their futures and the futures of generations to come. I could spend my 5 minutes I have to speak in front of the committee to repeat scientific research, statistics, and facts, but you all have access to that in the public domain. Instead, I'm going to appeal to your survival instincts and your responsibility as our political leaders to ask you to take the steps towards a sustainable city and economic system. We need to declare a climate emergency in Ottawa because paying for the aftermath of natural disasters rather than planning and preparing for them has never been a sustainable plan. This disaster capitalist ideology has been slowly killing us as a civilization. Only now, with our current climate situation, our doomsday is fast approaching. We need to declare a climate emergency in Ottawa because the youth should not have to feel as though the politicians responsible for their city and future are failing them or leaving their futures for someone else to deal with when we don't have time for another election to start preventing the climate apocalypse we are all heading towards. Your generation's mentality of inheriting this planet from past generations to do with what you'd like and then leaving your mess for future generations to clean up is no longer acceptable. We are borrowing this planet from future generations, from your children, because they are the ones who will grow up on a dying planet. It's time to treat the situation we are in with panic and to start taking serious climate action. Debating about whether or not to declare a climate emergency in Ottawa is ridiculous considering we live in a climate crisis. A climate emergency declaration in Ottawa will not be the end of the battle against climate change, but it is where we need to start. I recognize that my voice is not as politically valuable as the voice of wealthy business and corporations. However, I would like to leave you with one last thought. Let's imagine I'm 50 years old. I'm on this council, and I've been asked to write an editorial about the history of Ottawa's climate initiative. It is up to you, those on the council today, to decide whether this editorial will be one of economic and environmental collapse, or an editorial about this council's climate initiative and prevention of a climate and economic breakdown. After listening to what everyone here has to say, it is up to you what the legacy of this council will be. Those who had a chance but did nothing, or those who strayed from the status quo model and did everything they could to prevent disaster. I would like to say one more thing. I am 16 years old. I have been fighting for climate and social justice since I was 5 years old. And the system and the governments that I have been fighting have not changed. They should have. It's been 11 years. I am still fighting for the same things. I am fighting against the same things. And now, with the realization of a climate apocalypse on our horizon, you still do nothing. And that is unacceptable. And that will be on you. That will not be on us or the citizens. That will be on you and the corporations who allow this to happen. So please, don't kill us. Save us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Egley?
Yeah, I don't have a question so much as a comment. I can't speak for everybody around this table, but your voice is important, and don't ever lose sight of that. That's why we have this forum, that's why we have this room, and I appreciate sometimes dealing with levels of government is a little bit like running your head into the wall repeatedly. I get that.
Government does not always move as fast as people would like it to move. It's not as nimble as it should or could be. But please don't ever let that deter you from coming and saying your piece.
It hasn't. I'm here, aren't I?
Okay. Well, keep coming here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Just to build on that, don't ever believe that your voice.
I don't believe that.
Okay, good, perfect.
But it is the reality. Because even with this, what people have been saying and what people are saying, most governments still haven't changed. They have all this information. They know we're dying, but they're not doing anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lumsden, now you're up.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Lumsden, and I've come here to support the motion. If, in fact, the motion does entail, which I understand, concrete actions, that the staff should start concrete actions. That's what I think we need, concrete actions now. This morning, at our doorstep, a dirty magazine arrived. Actually, it was the Globe and Mail that delivered it, and it's not dirty, it's obscene. There's a high-end car with a beautiful young white man on it. I'm surprised it wasn't a scantily clad young woman, but if you open the pages, you'll find them there, all white. Anyway, this is not a racial thing that I'm after today, but as I said, I've come to support this motion because I am very concerned about pollution, as we all are. And one of the biggest culprits, or one of the culprits, is certainly pollution from cars. And people have talked about, they're worried about the future. Well, cars are doing damage now. They're doing that especially to children. There are studies that show when children start ingesting or breathing in gasoline fumes at an early age, they will suffer later on in life. And we have a city that, to my mind, has devoted itself to the car. And take our past actions. Many years ago, we decided we didn't need a train station downtown. Oh, lift up the train tracks. Let's have another road. More cars coming into the city. Every time I get on the Queensway, they seem to be widening it. What's that for? Bring more cars into the city, I presume. And somebody else mentioned, I think it was Emily Taman, said that we're making progress. Well, I don't see progress in the car business. Where I live on close to Montreal Road, they haven't taken a page from what happened on Richmond Road and Wellington, where they reduced from 4 lanes to 2 car lanes. On Montreal Road, we're still proposing two car lanes going into the city, notwithstanding that one of these days the LRT would open from Blair Road to downtown. I don't know if any consideration of that was taken in when they decided on needing 2 lanes down Montreal Road. Anyway, I did say that I wanted to focus on concrete action. So I looked at some suggestions. There was reference to high-speed rail. Well, I think that may be romantic because in our country, the climate and the cold winters and the freezing, it doesn't lend itself to high-speed rail, I think. But the other item that caught my attention was the notion of a car-free city. And one way that we might be able to achieve this is to imagine an inner city composed of the Queensway, Bronson Avenue, the Ottawa River and the Rideau River, and that we brought in a bylaw, or whatever is required, requiring every private car coming into the city to have at least 2 persons in it. As I look around, and as you do, I'm sure, and I look at cars that are built, most cars are built for at least 4 people to travel comfortably, but there's only 1 occupant. My estimate is
less than 1 minute, sir.
Okay. I've got 1 minute left? Yeah. So by my estimate, only 1 out of 8 cars has more than 1 person in it as they travel around the city. So my notion is that everyone coming into the city would have to have 2 persons in it, and they would arrange it, and I think they'd have a better life. They'd find somebody to travel in, and probably less solitary life, because they spend hours on the freeway. The people who live within this inner city would be exempt, and they would have some kind of like a disabled, handicap, comparable sign to show that they were exempt, and they could come in and go into the city, well, only 1 to the car. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lumsden? Seeing none. Bill Eggertson. And we received your email, like you said, an email yesterday, I believe. So we have that, but go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here today speaking as an individual environmentalist, and I want to express a number of worries. Less than 3 months ago, this committee convinced Council to delete the term climate protection from your title. Now you're thinking of declaring a climate emergency. I worry about credibility. I also worry about the growing surge in climate denial and climate resistance, including opposition to putting a price on carbon, because far more draconian measures are going to be needed to get us out of this nosedive. And I'm not really sure that we have the desire to adopt the numerous benefits of climate security. I worry that this motion does not recognize what has happened over the past 50 years. An emergency is an unforeseen situation caused by factors beyond our control. But we have known about this issue and what to do about it for a long time, from Earth Day 1970 to Kyoto Protocol 1997, from Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth to our daily news on climate disasters. Every meeting of scientific climate groups wraps up with the same warning: we have passed the point of meetings and studies. I worry about the confusion over the roles for people and for government. People are the cause of climate insecurity, so people must be the solution. Local government has direct or indirect control over half of our carbon emissions, but this motion only asks us to continue chanting that meaningless 1.5-degree mantra instead of telling us how many kilowatt hours less we have to consume. It calls to deepen our commitment by holding more meetings and producing more reports. But this city is backing down on its urgent need to amend the official plan to allow higher energy performance from new houses. We spend $5 billion a year to import energies into this community. I think that's too high. I worry about the lack of understanding of how easily we can address this issue. The average home in Ontario emits 3.5 tons of carbon every year, or 2 kilograms for every square foot of floor space, most of it from space heating. Ottawa has more than 400,000 homes. If they semi-seriously reduce their energy consumption, we would eliminate 1 megaton of carbon. There is also super low-hanging fruit for cars and trucks and offices and industry and agriculture. We've also failed to grasp them. The only thing I don't worry about is the ability and the feasibility of taking direct personal action. I renovated my older home into one of the top 20 of energy-efficient homes in Canada. I reduced my carbon emissions by 7 tons. I consume almost no electricity during peak period, and my solar panels feed thousands of green kilowatt hours into the grid for other people to use. Like everyone in this room, I can talk the talk. Like many in this room, I can walk the walk. I claim to be able to run the run, which is what we all need to do, and we need to do it now. So other than psychological therapy, how do I address my concerns? Any declaration must include details of the range of actions that government will introduce immediately. We've known what needs to be done and what can be done for half a century. Let's do it. Any declaration must also include a strong commitment from residents that we are ready, willing, and able to take drastic personal action to comply with those measures. No more stalling for us. As you can surmise, I hope you oppose this motion unless it is amended significantly to call on Council to stop greenwashing, stop stalling, and set rules for people that we know are needed to get the job done now. We do not need more meetings. We do not need more reports. We do need to hold our feet to the fire. This is not a climate emergency now. It's been an emergency for 50 years. If you do label it as an emergency today, it means that both government and people have been what I call criminally negligent for the past 50 years. My final worry is that any motion calling for anything other than strong personal action will delay and obfuscate and give people another reason to avoid the work that is necessary to avoid climate collapse within the final 3 terms of Council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Question from Councillor DeRuse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Bill, for your presentation. I cannot disagree more than you, because this, if you read the motion, it's so much diluted. It's only symbolic. There is nothing much in it, really. When you wake up tomorrow morning, even if we vote it in and after Council approve it, there is nothing in it. Other than symbolic and other than word put in 8 items that we do already now, it's nothing in it. So I totally agree with you. My question to you is, I know that you and I had this discussion about your home, and I know that the diversion, isn't it better to give incentive for people in this city that they motivate themselves and they want to do some initiative in their home, and it could be in the form of taxes or something. Like we keep talking about we need to do better and we need to, but there is not exactly a fundamental solution. Just a question to you, what do you think of something like that?
There is not a single solution. The easiest answer I can give you, sir, is everybody says, you know, somebody has to pay for it. My house uses approximately 50,000 kilowatt hours a year less than what it did before I renovated it. 50,000, let's call it 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So I'm saving $5,000 a year. I have got an immediate payback on that. I've got a solar panel. I was the first in Eastern Ontario. That's revenue. I can't use that electricity. I have to provide it to others. I think people do need to understand that they can save money if they do the right thing. They can save money if they leave their car at home and take transit. They can save money to do a whole lot of things. So I'm hoping that Council puts a little bit more onus on the people of this city to do the right thing. I don't think we should sit there waiting for Justin or for Doug to come out with money, or even for you people to come out with money. Yeah, obviously, if you can provide that incentive. I'm more pushing things like the official plan. We are spending, the taxpayers of Ottawa will spend $75 million to install a high-voltage power line into the South Nepean area. I fought that. I'm on the IESO Advisory Committee. We fought that, saying there were ways of doing it. The city said, no, there isn't. A consultant's report finally came out saying, only if you put it in your official plan can you insist that new development be greener, the way Toronto does. That's what I want Ottawa to do. That's zero cost to the city. It has huge implications on the $5 billion a year we pay.
You made a very good point, because I know we're working right now on the new official plan, and I know it's gas emission and a very important piece of and component. So are you trying to say that we should do a little bit more better towards these initiatives throughout our official plan?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It's a good thing you're on our Planning Advisory Committee that I also happen to chair. Yeah. All right, our next speaker is Christine Now, there was, James O'Grady's not here because I don't see him. And then there was a James Russell. No, thanks. Christine Eplitz. And then our final speaker would be Carolyn Clackdoyle. Is that right? Okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you. I arrived here today not planning to speak at all. I arrived here because I support Sean Menard's motion. I thought it was important, and I really wanted to see what a committee meeting would be like, and I found it extremely interesting. First of all, I'm a citizen, but maybe I can be identified by the fact of I'm a climate change casualty. I slipped on Spark Street Mall in end of January, which ended up in a broken arm, 2 days in the hospital, 3 hours of surgery. I just got permission to drive my car. That's 2.5 months later. Now, if you stop for a minute, the economic aspects of my breaking my arm, and I consider it was climate change, as you know, that created the conditions this winter that you've all heard about from your constituents. 5 people in the hospital spent 3 hours on my arm. Now, I know the city is not paying my bill, but the taxpayers of Ottawa, when they pay their Ontario taxes, paid my bill. I suspect I've been back for many x-rays, clinics, etc., so I suspect I've cost the taxpayers of Ontario, and we should all be looking at the big picture, $10,000 maybe, I don't know. So you talk about economics, although I wasn't going to focus so much on my arm, but the other speakers here have talked a lot about, yes, there is a climate emergency, et cetera, et cetera. I would like to talk about why you all know it is, you all know it's serious, you all know it's a crisis, you all know the economic downsides of it, but why today should you vote for this motion? What difference does it make? Well, the last speaker talked about symbols and said, oh, it's just a symbol. And over there you said, just a symbol. But in fact, in grade 5, we study symbols. We study the importance of the Canadian flag. That is a symbol. Children learn, people go to a hockey game and they wear the symbols of their hockey team. Symbols are critically important. That's why you should vote for this motion. What would the symbol of this motion do? Well, you've talked today about teenagers thinking of suicide. If you turn down this motion, that is a symbol. That is an indication to children, to teenagers, that you don't care. You don't think it's an emergency. You talked today about people not composting because of the yuck factor. Well, a lot of people don't have the full picture of, well, if I compost, it makes a difference to climate change. If you make this motion, it says that the councillors that they have elected to be the leaders, to make the important decisions, say, yes, climate change is an emergency. So maybe they'll compost without using plastic bags. The symbols are critically important. Perhaps they'll take transit when they could drive their car because the city has said, yes, it is an emergency. And I've been listening to the staff today, and I don't get the feeling that they are as gung-ho as I would have hoped that they would be in looking for ways, moving quickly to put climate change initiatives into action, looking at ways that they can make a difference. And I've seen some of you here today trying to push staff, and they may be very busy, but they need a powerful message from you that climate change is critical. It's absolutely critical. And it's up to you to take leadership and just put that symbol in place. It's critical. And the things that go along with this motion are really, really important. Well, it's a little bit of money, but what is the cost? How much money did the city spend in cleaning up after floods? How much money does the city spend in cleaning up after tornadoes? How much money does the city spend dealing with the potholes and the claims? I didn't sue, but I sure could have. And there were a lot of, I canceled 2 trips. There were a lot of serious financial implications from my one broken arm. I'm lucky I didn't break my arm or my hip. And that's small in the big picture of what is the financial cost of climate change. And is anybody in the city looking at what you're already paying? You're so concerned about saving money. What are you already paying for climate change? So I probably meant to say more, but that gets my essential message across. It is a symbol, yes, but there is some meat to it, and it is the beginning. And if you don't vote this in, you will lose, especially as we continue to have problems down the road.
You're about a minute over time, so
okay,
I just want to let you go, but that's okay. All right, thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none. I will say, don't judge all committees by this one. I'm a super weird chair.
No, it's not you I'm judging. It's
No,
but
I'm
I see where you voted.
This is your
I
only
see
committee.
where you voted on the single-use plastic and compost. That tells me a whole lot.
Okay. That was unnecessary. I was trying to be nice. Got thrown back in my face. Okay, so the next speaker, final speaker, is Carolyn Clack-Doyle. Yeah, you just press the button in front of you there. The thing will turn red, and then you can go. Oh, just press it. Yep, there you go.
Oh, good. I've listened today. I'm really glad I came in. I wasn't going to speak, but I thought I'd like to comment on some of the very good points that everyone around here in front of me mentioned to the speakers. First off, I was very encouraged by the presenters. I'm a resident of the city, and I have one voice. And I can choose to use that creatively and to amplify it in whatever way I think is meaningful to me, and perhaps to others. I can think about my children and perhaps their children, and I can hope that all the future residents of the city will be healthy and will not have to endure the kinds of complications and the kinds of difficulties that climate change will bring their way. So your voice, of course, is the most significant, because what you can do is really respond to an emergency. So that's how I see this question of the resolution, and I do support it. I think it can unleash business and institutions locally. It will, we can think in terms of how we can solve the problems. I know insurance has taken this issue very, very seriously, as another person has pointed out, in their policies that we now purchase. More and more, there are even some uncovered calamities like microbursts, of which there doesn't seem to be a solution nor coverage. As you probably are aware of in international journalism right now, there's a lot of talk about the necessity of supporting and preserving wild spaces as our carbon sinks. And we're one of the 5 last countries on the planet to have to tackle that. So preservation on a local level is so significant, and it's a responsibility. And as the capital of Canada, we need to lead in this respect, as well as see other countries like the USA, Brazil, Russia, and Australia, all of our 5 countries, do everything we can to preserve whatever sinks carbon. Our wild waters are in trouble, and that's our lakes, our rivers, our waterways, our oceans. We know the fish are moving. We know they're having difficulty spawning. All this is in discussion right now. It is hard to predict fish economies and where they're going to be. And also, we have the best researchers working on this, like developing clam gardens and these kinds of things are going on right now. So we also, of course, one more aspect was mentioned as well, is the the 70% loss of our insects. And when you talk about complexity in the biological world, you just kind of know that this stuff goes up the food chain. If the insects are in trouble, the birds are in trouble. If the birds are in trouble, you know, the insects, the reptiles are in trouble. We have the mammals affected, and we are mammal. You know, that's not a yuck factor. There's a, you know, we can get right into our own abilities to reproduce. It's not just the animal kingdom, and we are part of the animal kingdom, and we are having those difficulties today, as we know. So I don't really understand how we can all get beyond this, right around this, and think, what is planning today? What is planning today if we can't respond to an emergency? But I did really like what this gentleman had to say, is how do we raise the issues so we don't freak everyone out? So I was thinking about that as everyone was talking today, and I thought, well, you know, cancer, trauma, addiction, at some point we never talked about it. And then there was treatment, and now we're talking prevention. So, wild spaces is not enough. We have to talk restoration. That means put more of the carbon sinks in our communities. Put it in places so that we can all learn about it, so our children learn about it, so it's public space so that we can know more about the animal kingdom and how to preserve it. The idea here, of course, is the innovation. So that would be a positive aspect. We know that universities are looking at new food delivery systems. We now know that they're looking at things like supply chain, triple bottom line. Where is our products coming from? Where are our products coming from? How can they come to us so it doesn't damage human health, as well as...
just politely ask you to wrap up.
Okay,
yeah.
So my point is, let's embrace this. Let's hear from you to the community that the emergency is prevention. Now we're going to do it now. We're not going to wait to do prevention later. We're going to do it now by unleashing the innovation and creativity of the community. That's not partisan. And that can put us all together and try to find solutions for all age groups, things we can all do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for delegation? Nope, seeing none. Thank you so much for your time. All right, so that's it for delegations. We're on to any questions or comments. Just try to package it all together so we don't go back on more than once. If you have questions for the mover, by all means, he's right here. So first up is Jacques Cloutier.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the delegations that came out to speak with us today. I appreciate it very much. The motion is pretty clear, and I appreciate it. It's not just an empty declaration. Kingston had a bit of an empty declaration, but this one has more substance, and Councillor Menard did a fairly good job at crafting this. It's achievable. We know in the last couple of years there's been ice storms and windstorms and flooding, and these have costs to put that, insurance and repair and injury, as we heard today, and tax increases. And but we are the City of Ottawa, and we are sandwiched between residents and between other levels of government, and the more municipalities band together, the more those other levels of government will also unify to tackle what's a very serious issue. And we, the city, I'm somewhat proud of what this city has accomplished. LRT, the combined sewage and storage tunnel, LEED buildings, LED lighting, the hydro chaudière station, which produces power, might be one of the largest municipal power producers in Canada, greening of the fleet, trees, and we'll keep going. We'll keep doing it. I said we're sandwiched because on the other side, there's our residents. Some are here so committed to improving the situation. And I was trying to think of an example, some who will continue to insist on avocados in clamshells in January, and that costs a lot of money to ship to Ottawa, and so our personal habits will also have to change. So I guess, so I will be absolutely supporting this motion. And I think it's a step in the right direction. I look forward to discussing with staff the procedures that are in place that this motion is asking about, and how we can move this ahead. Thank you, Councillor Menard, for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Cloutier. Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone, for spending the day with us. Welcome to our world. I wasn't going to speak either. I thought this was, I thought we should have just voted on this at the beginning and walked away. But, it dawned on me that, as I've been around City Hall here for a long, long time, and 10 years ago, this meeting would not have happened. 5 years ago, it may probably not have happened either. But today we were outside at a rally where half of the folks there, and there were a lot, were kids under the age of 18. And over the last several years, on many issues, queer issues, trans issues, environment, it's occurred to me, and it's repeatedly shown to me, that the kids are not waiting for us anymore. They're finished. They're not waiting for us to lead anymore. They're done. They're going to lead us. They're going to be the leaders because we haven't done our job. So we can get on board with them because they're coming up right behind us and they're going to replace us. And they'll get it done. And if we look at what we're debating here today, officially declare a climate emergency for the purposes of naming, framing, and deepening our commitment to protecting our economy, our ecosystems, and our community from climate change. What could be simpler? Could there be any doubt that we are in a climate emergency? We just had the worst winter ever. And the year before that, we had the worst winter ever. And the year before that, we had the most unusual winter ever. We have had, in parts of our city, 100-year storms a few years apart, several times. And we dump a ton of money into new pumping systems, taxpayer dollars. We've had tornadoes where somehow, miraculously, no one was killed. But eventually, our infrastructure doesn't keep up. And if I look at number 4, C, use an equity and inclusion lens in the prioritization of actions. And to me, that is the most important piece in this whole report and recommendation that we have in front of us. Because I'll tell you, and we all know it, when disaster happens, it's not us. We are not on the front lines. It is people living in poverty. It is people living in inadequate housing. It is people globally who are living in parts of the world where you are going to get the mudslides and you are going to get the earthquakes. And here in the city of Ottawa, it is the people who can least afford it. After the tornado last year, by December, we had one family still displaced in a shelter, in a family shelter here in the city of Ottawa, because they were a poor family and they were out there and they were renting and they had nowhere to go. They did not have insurance. And that is who will be affected by climate change and climate emergency. So I would put it to many people that if you're comfortable today, maybe you're not scared. And the kids, yeah, they're afraid. You're darn right they're afraid. But they're not afraid because we're telling them too much. They're afraid because we're not doing enough. And they know that we're not doing enough. And they're the ones who are going to pay the price. But when I walked out there this morning and I saw the number of kids that were out there, I thought, you know what? There's a chance they might save us from ourselves. So I will be supporting this. I'd like to see us do a whole lot more, but this is a well thought out, thoughtful motion that only encourages us to continue and to ensure that what we're doing through our energy evolution and our climate change management plan, that we continue to do it and that we are honest with you residents, with ourselves, that we have a climate emergency, and that we are going to take all of the necessary actions to ensure that we at least halt it. People live in our cities. We are the ones responsible. Transportation and energy are the two elements that cause emissions, and we have almost complete carriage over those two. So I thank the mover of the motion, and I look forward to seeing it pass.
Thank you. I put you early. I thought you might put the vote procedurally. No, you can't. You're done. Councillor Eglai.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I do mean thank you, because I know while the motion concept came from Councilor Menard, I know there was a lot of work between the two of you, along with staff, to come up with what I think is a very practical, doable motion that puts this issue on the radar. I appreciate that some people are uncomfortable with the word emergency. Some people in this room, some people around this table are uncomfortable with the word emergency. And it's, in a lot of ways, it's not a typical emergency. We heard about typical emergencies from, I think, the doctors left, but this is also not a typical situation, and it takes a different approach, I think, to address it and to hopefully fix it. I represent the ward that was probably impacted the worst, or certainly on par with other areas, with the tornado. When I first got elected 9 years ago, if you had asked me as part of my job, would I be responding to a tornado and trying to figure out how to help my residents through that, it never would have crossed my mind. And if events like that don't give an indication that this is an emergency, I don't know what does. And I'm just going to very briefly read to you just a little bit of a Facebook post. I have a neighbor who lives right across the street from me. His name is Oliver. Oliver is a little guy. He's maybe 8, 10 years old, has a very rich imagination. And Oliver came up, and his mother posted this, Oliver came up with the idea for what he calls the trash team. And his mom asked him, why do you want to do this? And he said, well, I think I'm pretty good with good at it, and helping people clean up around their yards and the road. And maybe if I get really good at it, he says, I can make a bit of money. And the mother says to him, Oliver, what are you going to do with the money? And this was his reply. What are you going to buy with the money? Parts to make a machine with a suction hose, which sucks in bad air and reuses it and makes it good to breathe again. And another machine to take the garbage and pack it into small blocks so it takes up less room at the dump. And when we do that, if we have any left, we can buy stuff we can have fun with. So I want to support Oliver. I want us all to have fun. I want my grandkids to have fun. I want their grandkids to have fun. And if, as my counterpart here pointed out, if the kids and the youth are telling us this needs to be done, then I think we should listen to them. And we've heard from a number of youth this morning and this afternoon. And, you know, I'd like to go home tonight and say to Oliver, you know what, you've got the trash team, we've got the council, let's work together. And let's make those changes that need to be done. So I want to thank, again, the chair and the vice chair for crafting this. It's practical, it's workable, it makes it a serious discussion point and gives us, I think, a firm foundation to go forward on things like the official plan. As chair of public health, I can tell you part of our strategic discussion was about responding to climate change and what we can do from a health perspective. And this only bolsters that kind of discussion, gives us more resources to move it forward. So I don't know how all my colleagues around the circle here are going to vote, but I would certainly urge them all to support this and go home to their respective Olivers and say, we did the right thing today. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Guys, with the clapping. Enough with the clapping. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we all agree that we want to do the right thing here. I think it's just different ways of coming at this. I looked at this motion to see if there was what I could support in here, and most of what I saw, and I think speakers have pointed this out, most of what's in that motion we're already doing. So then I wondered, why aren't we celebrating that? Why aren't we talking about the fact that we're already doing this stuff and moving the marker even further? Like, what's some more things we can do? For example, with the garbage, why aren't we talking about alternatives like incineration that can create power instead of landfills? You know, planting more trees around the city. We've been doing a lot of that over the last 2 terms of council. Planting gardens, we talked about that earlier today. You know, we have that ability, we can do it. LRT, it's going to make a huge reduction in greenhouse gases here in the area. All this stuff is within our wheelhouse. We have to be careful, and it's happened time and time again, where I find council wants to overstep what's in our wheelhouse. They want to get involved in the provincial and the federal levels of government, which have the responsibility for the policies and to actually enact positive changes for our country and for our province. We can do our part here at the city, and can we do more? Absolutely. Are we doing a lot now? We're doing a lot more than I think any one of those other cities that declared an emergency. So when I started looking at this, I saw things in here I could support, except I don't like the use of the word emergency. To me, if the chair of public health wanted to declare an opioid emergency, I would be right behind him on that. We're losing lives every day to that. Our young people are getting hurt seriously, and we're losing great leaders of tomorrow because of a drug that's being put into our community. But we're not talking about opioids. What we're talking about here is we want to declare this an emergency. I think without that word, as I said, without that word emergency in there, there's a lot in here I could see that I like. Some of the speakers today talked about, only 1 or 2 I should say, talked about the real offenders in the climate change issue, and that's the BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and to a lesser degree our neighbors to the south. If they're not doing anything about climate change, nothing we at City Council here are going to do is going to change all those outcomes that are being predicted to various degrees. We all know something's going to happen. I just don't think, like, you know, I heard terms today like an apocalypse, you know, Canada's going to be extinct, 790 million people are going to die in the near future. Like, those are statements I can't see or believe. There's nothing I've read. One of the documents I read is from an environmental research scientist from Councillor Menard's ward. I think we were all copied on this, and he makes a very good case as to why we have to think about some of these statements that are here and some of the reports we're looking at. So I wondered that, and I wondered what we're going to do if Ottawa declares a climate emergency. Why isn't there a climate emergency in Cornwall, Prescott, or Renfrew? Are they not going to warm up to the same degree as us? They're not getting touched by tornadoes and flooding and all the things, icy sidewalks that we're going to say is the fault of climate change? I don't think so. I think this across the river in Gatineau, they should be they have the same weather issues we have. It's just a matter of what's causing that. There's no doubt in my mind that man contributes to it. I just don't think that if we declare this emergency and do the things that we're doing so far and just say that's good enough, that that's going to make any change in the ice storms of the future or the floods that are to come. Councillor McKinney mentioned a flood in '09 that affected my area. She said it was climate change. In fact, when we got in the ground, we found out that it was, instead of having 8 and 12-inch pipes in the ground, it was 4-inch pipes, so it couldn't handle the water. We as a city went in there and fixed it. So was that man-made? Yes, but I wouldn't call it climate change. So anyway, I won't support it with the word emergency on there. I'd love to see us work more on more of the things we can do. I heard the councillor talk that he supports what we've been doing with street lights and park lighting, changing them all to LED. We get a quick payback from that. I'm good with that. And the last point I'll make on this is the hydro dividend is something that we should never be banking on. I'd rather, if we want to talk about doing this stuff, let's get it into the budget. Let's get a dedicated resource to it and not rely on a windfall that may not be there next year. And then what do? Stop what we're doing? That's not good. There's some great ideas here. Let's get it into the budget and start advancing it more. Okay, so anyway, that's my thought, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you so much, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly appreciate not only the debate here, but the speakers that have come down have contributed to this discussion, and my colleagues' comments more recently. And Councillor McKinney, I'm just going to point out one thing to you. Some words that you said, certainly agree with 99% of what you said, but I'm not willing to wait for the next generation. I do agree with you that the next generation will be more bold and precise with their action, but we can't wait. We can't wait for them to take over. We have to take immediate actions. Climate change is real. It has been an issue. It is an issue. It will continue to be an issue. And the impacts are real and significant across the planet, let alone in our own city. And humans have contributed to the vast majority of climate change, the vast majority. And as I've said, it's incumbent upon us to take bold action now. When I was younger, we had some younger delegates here today, I was engaged in social action causes. Nuclear disarmament, acid rain were issues in the 80s when I was first exposed and interested in, marching for a cause and hanging my hat on issues. And although I didn't vote at that time, I certainly felt that I would rather have a voice than be silent and not be engaged in what I felt were issues of that day. When I first heard of my colleagues' intentions, I wasn't aware of all the other clauses. I thought it was just to make a simple declaration, and I was concerned that here we go again with more words, that we really need to focus on actions, concrete actions that we can achieve, we can hold staff accountable to, that we can measure, but we can see a real difference in this city. And as colleagues know, my background is economics. I'm not an environmental economist. My specialty is labor market, but the costs of inaction will be far greater than the costs of various initiatives that we decide to pursue. So there are costs to programs and initiatives that we want to support and allocate budget money to, but the costs of not doing that or just doing marginal issues will be far, far greater. So it is like an insurance policy. We buy an insurance policy not because we want to use it at some point, but in the event that something catastrophic happens, we're covered. And I see this in simple terms as an insurance policy. Let's proceed with a number of initiatives that we know will contribute to reducing GHGs. And if we're wrong, we'll have done the right thing. But if we decide not to do anything, again, we'll get to the point where there really is no return. It's not a federal issue exclusively. It's not a provincial issue exclusively. It's every level of government, every corporation, every community group, every household, everyone is responsible for taking action to make this a priority. And certainly, the planet, 4.5 billion years old, I'm here for 90 years, and my question to myself is, what is my role as a steward as someone who's living right now in this moment in time, someone who's elected and has the power and the ability to do something, I want to take that bold action and contribute to that. Otherwise, I shouldn't be here. If I'm not willing to make those investments and contributions, then I'm occupying a seat that someone else should be sitting in. So I see that absolutely as my role and my responsibility. So I do appreciate the motion. The motion is comprehensive. There was some criticism that maybe it's not bold enough, that it could encompass more. I appreciate that. I recognize that. But this certainly, as the chair stated in his opening, provides, I think, some greater precision and clarity into some of the initiatives of what we're looking for as staff work on these. Let's get right into the meat. And so I appreciate Councillor Menard's precision in that regard. Item 8 of the motion talks about working with other senior levels of government, and I think what I'm going to do for when this comes to council is actually list a number of initiatives I would like either the provincial and or federal government to look at, and what we as a council can look at, and that is the home energy retrofit tax credit, rebates for e-cars, public transit tax deductions. Some of these one level of government may support currently, but the other doesn't. Maybe it was a previous deduction that was permitted but has since been pulled, and building code changes. So I'm going to get some wording together for council. It's not ready for today, but you know, again, what is the benefit of declaring an emergency and working together with other municipalities across our province and country, particularly in election year, but it would be just as important if it was an election year. It's to, as a group of municipalities and other organizations, to say this is the top priority, and we want to leverage as many levels of government and any other community group and organization as well to make sure that this is the number one. And that's why making a statement is important, and that's why having an aggressive plan with measurable items is important as well. So without any hesitation, I will be supporting the motion before us.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor DeRuse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank all the speakers, and I want to really let all the speakers that they came today to speak to us, like your voice has been heard, and it's not like we're not ignoring people, but it's good for you, and we encourage you all the time to come and talk to the committee member, because your voice is always evaluated, and we always listen to the issue and what's going on the ground. My thing is climate change is a real issue? I say yes. If I say no, I won't be real, because it is an issue. But in my personal view, it is a global issue. Let's all agree on that, and we are doing as much as we can as a resident in the city of Ottawa and as a municipal representative. If you look at in the last 15 years, if we say we're not doing our job, that means we're undermining our staff, we're undermining our programs. We have over 30 programs. In the last 15 years, we've been working, spending millions and millions of dollars. I'm not going to do the homework for every councillor. Every councillor can get a copy of the initiative that we've been doing. But to sit here around that table and say we're in an emergency and the sky is going to fall, and put a fear in the resident on the city, inside the city of the resident of the city of Ottawa, I don't agree with that. I look at the programs that we've been doing in the last 15 years. Can we do better? Yeah. This motion talk about deepen our commitment. We're already there. We're committed. We are looking about air quality and climate change plan. The city official new plan, we heard today from some of our speakers. Now, if we need to do more, we do more, because right now it's the time. We are on official plan review right now. Actually, not a review. We're doing brand new official plan. We're working with FCM on climate change. We're talking the city is the top green employer. I don't see we talk and celebrate about what we've been doing good. All what we've been sitting here talking about what we're not doing. So you know what, the way I look at it, I look at the motion, there is only one thing I agree with Councillor Menard. Number 8, I totally agree with you. Number 8 talks about work with senior level of government to get funding and resources. It's our opportunity right now to talk to our provincial partner and our federal partner to see what kind of program, real meaning program, not just symbolic. This motion is nothing different than like sanctuary city. We're just talking about it, but yeah, it's not. We're not really doing anything much about it. And we talk also about council sponsor group. Well, look at around that table. That the people that you want to do another group, they're sitting right here. And you want to discuss climate issue. I think this is where the table that we discuss climate issue. If you want to put priority on different things, we're here to listen for that. But for us to declare an emergency in the city of Ottawa and join the climate emergency group, I don't think I can really take that, and I really cannot support that, and I don't think my resident will appreciate that. So thank you very much, and I won't be supporting this, and I encourage my colleague not to do the same.
All right, thank you so much, Councillor Drees. I'm going to let Councillor the Vice Chair have the last word on this, as it's his report. I just want to address a couple things that we heard today, and one specifically is the assertion that this is symbolic. If it was symbolic, it would not be here. I wouldn't let it get to this point. I don't support symbolism. I don't support pandering, grandstanding, posturing. I think it's useless politics. We see it constantly. You know, I voted against the Blue Dot Declaration because it meant nothing. I voted against this committee actually raising the target to 2050 because there was actually nothing in that report that would get you there. So great, go raise it all you want. If you're not going to do anything to get there, what does it matter? Stop misleading residents. We have a responsibility to be honest and truthful to people. If we go tell our residents that this is a misleading motion, they will believe it. Or this is, sorry, a symbolic motion, they'll believe it. And that's irresponsible of us. Because there are items in this motion that actually do stuff. It requires things to come back to us, and it requires further decisions down the road. None of us have to commit to those future decisions today, but it's just asking for more information. But I just take real exception to the fact that someone would consider this to be a symbolic motion. 100% Kingston's was. There was nothing to it. They declared a climate emergency. It's crazy that they get credit for doing it because they've achieved nothing except for joining a list of cities that have declared a climate emergency. But there's nothing in that motion. You can go find it. It's on their website. Go read the text. There's nothing to it. This has 8 specific points. 1 is the declaration. The other 7 can lead to things that are beneficial. And stop thinking that green only costs money. That is not true. There are things that we can do, things that we can do for our residents that will benefit them financially and still be green. I said this to John Willing yesterday, and I'll say it again. Stop thinking that those two things are mutually exclusive. Environmental protection and the financial wherewithal of the city are not separate things. They can be seen as one. I think we can prove that through Energy Evolution and through different projects that we're working on. I think we've been trying to do that with phase 1 of Energy Evolution. I think we can continue that down that road. So before we go to a vote, I'll just let Councillor Menard wrap up on his motion. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Chair Moffat. I appreciate that and appreciate the committee lasting this long for today, as well as the folks in the audience. I think it is a historic moment here, and hopefully at council as well when we pass this. And the reason it is that we're acknowledging this and we're setting out a concrete plan. I've worked with staff, I worked with the chair, but in particular with staff and folks in my office, worked with staff to craft this in a way that we felt we could deliver on. And the staff folks, I think, at City Hall here, they want to do this. They're not dinosaurs that don't believe in climate change. They're not climate change deniers. They care about it, they believe it's real, and they want support and help to change things. And so it was about reaching out to those offices and making sure that we're delivering for them as well. Because they're going to come back and deliver for our city, and I strongly believe that, and I support our staff. If we didn't pass this motion, it'd be a signal to them and the work that they're doing in some cases that we don't believe it's a priority, when I know we do. And so to our staff, who are going to come back with concrete actions, with funding behind them, I'm happy that we're able to be your partner in all of this with the rest of the city. I believe it's an emergency, and I think that council will pass as well. There may be a question that comes up at council table, but if you look at what's happened with the degree rise per degree Celsius rise globally versus Canada, and the targets set by nations in the Paris Climate Summit in 2015, along with temperature rises, the emergency management plans that we've had to put in place as a result of floods and tornadoes and summers of extreme heat. These are things that constitute an evolving emergency. The Canadian Medical Association, Canadian Public Health Association called climate change the greatest health threat of the 21st century. And so it's upon us now to start to act, and this is the beginning. It doesn't do everything that we want to do, but it'll start the conversation to a point where we haven't been in decades. So we need to start the conversation with this type of motion. So appreciate the support around the table, and happy that folks are going to be voting in favor of this, and we'll move to council as the next step. So thank you to the chair for working collaboratively and on this, and to staff for all of their help as well.
Thank you very much. Yeas and nays on the motion. Actually, I guess I should read. No, I already read it at the start, and it's really long. So yeas and nays on the motion.
Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor Cloutier?
Oui.
Councillor Darouz?
No.
Councillor Eglai?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley?
No.
Councillor McKinney?
Yes.
Councillor Menard?
Yes.
And Chair Moffat?
Yes.
Carried, 6-2.
Stop clapping. Sheesh. I tell you. Like Peter Hume was more strict on that. In-camera items, none. Information previously distributed. Municipal drinking water systems, 2018 reports. It's good, we all got that. Notice of motion, none. Inquiries, none. Other business, none. Adjournment.
Carried.
Next meeting, Tuesday, 21st of May, 2019. Thank you, bye.
First day of summer.